This week, it's been years since Mr. Haroon Meer has been on the show. He's back. He's the CEO and researcher at our sponsor, Thinkst, to talk about why hackers should create companies and some of the technical details behind Thinkst's tool, Canary. In the second segment, we welcome Guru. He really is a guru on cloud configuration, auditing, and monitoring. He's the CEO and co-founder even of Cloudneeti to talk about their SaaS product delivering continuous cloud security and compliance assurance to businesses. In the security news, lots of stories this week. Serious vulnerabilities found in an X-ray device. Facebook is facing $5 billion in fines over privacy violations. Pre-installed malware on bootleg streaming devices. Hackers use SIM swapping to steal cryptocurrency, and how a 29-year-old computer scientist created the algorithm that took the first ever picture of a black hole. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. NetSparker, the developers of desktop and cloud-based web application security scanners that enable you to automatically identify vulnerabilities in your web applications and web services. NetSparker scanners employ a unique and dead-accurate vulnerability scanning engine that automatically verifies vulnerabilities with their proof of concept. For more information, visit them on the web at netsparker.com or email at contact@netsparker.com. Organizations' internal networks are overly permissive and can't distinguish trusted from untrusted applications. Attackers abuse this condition to move laterally through networks, bypassing address-based controls to spread malware. Edgewise abstracts security policies away from traditional network controls that rely on IP addresses, ports, and protocols, and instead ties controls directly to applications. Edgewise allows organizations to analyze the network attack surface and segment workloads based on the software and how it's communicating. Edgewise monitors applications and protects data paths using zero-trust segmentation. Visit edgewise.net/Security Weekly to get your free month of visibility. Some restrictions apply. Are you an enterprise dissatisfied with overpriced analytics software that can't keep up with modern data? If so, then GravWell is the solution for you. GravWell is an unstructured data analytics platform for enterprises who demand total data visibility across their network. GravWell lets your security team go beyond the SIM and fuse data sources to correlate and answer questions you didn't know needed to be asked. Go to gravwell.io/Security Weekly for an unlimited data trial and gain uncompromising visibility today.
And welcome to the show. But first, let me introduce you to a man who took a picture of his very own black hole, if you know what I mean. Paul Asadori.
Welcome, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. This is episode 601, recorded on April 25th, 2019, here in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. To my left here in studio, Mr. Matt Alderman is with us.
I missed 600, so I had to be here for 601.
You're here for 601. It's okay. It's
better
good.
late than never.
That's right. That's right. Always nice to have you here in studio, Matt, participating in the shows. Of course, Mr. Larry Pesce is here. Your beard is getting pretty epic, dude.
Yeah, like every couple of weeks I have I should just shave this off.
Yeah.
And I don't.
And you resist.
And I resist.
You resist the temptation.
Yeah.
It makes the morning routine so much easier.
It does.
What, not having to shave?
Yes.
Well, I mean,
Yes.
I'm not the Unix neck beard. I still shave underneath and on the cheeks, or it ends up at my eyeballs.
Right.
But that's only once a week.
Sure.
So it's
Easy
and the hair. I mean, we all suffer from the same
yeah.
hair problem.
We
Right?
all have the same hair problem.
Yep.
I just can't get it to be manageable.
Yeah. Get out of the pool. Done. We're good to go.
Good to go. Joff Thayer's good to go. He's on the lines remotely. Joff, welcome.
Also has the same hair problem.
I do. You know what happens to hair? It just goes south. So, it's fine if it grows here. It grows in other places we're not going to mention. But it is good to be here. I have not been on the show in a couple of weeks, so I've been missing you guys.
It's good to have you. Mr. Lee Neely is here remotely, virtually, as it were. Welcome, Lee.
Good to be back on the show. Couldn't be here for 600. Was busy hanging out in Portugal and Spain, researching the origins of the port so we could have better choices in the studio.
Sweet. I like it.
Nice.
I'm always down for a good port. Scan, port, and port scan. Register for our upcoming webcast with Observe It and Kaseya. That's right. We're doing lots of webcasts. We're on a webcast tear, and they're going to be awesome. I tell you.
We did one today
Mm-hmm.
with ServiceNow. I think we have 2 or 3 in May, 3 in June, maybe 3 in July. Holy cow!
It's craziness. You can always go to securityweekly.com/webcasts. Register for our upcoming webcast. If you want to check out the archive, you can go to securityweekly.com/on-demand. John Strand will be teaching active defense and cyber deception at Black Hat 2019. You can register by going to blackhat.com/US-19. I think in a previous show I said /.
I think you said
dash.
/. Yeah.
I just need to learn to read what's on the teleprompter. Yeah, embrace the burgundy spirit. With us this evening, he's no stranger to the show, although it's been too long since he's been on. Haroon Meer is the founder of Thinkst, the company behind the love behind Thinkst Canary is just amazing. Haroon's contributed to several books on information security and has published a number of papers on various topics in the field and has very, very nice hair. Haroon, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. It's probably the thing I'm most proud of.
It's very nice. You've managed to maintain that over the years. I just have to shave my head.
Amongst other things.
Haroon, it is really nice to have you on the show. I don't remember the episode when you were on last, but it was a long time ago.
Yeah, it was ages ago. It's good to be back.
Yes. And so, Haroon, you are a hacker who created a company, and that's where we want to start the conversation. And I think that, earlier you mentioned Doug's song, and I think Doug's success and his background in being a very technical computer scientist and security researcher are things that keep me motivated and moving forward. It's one of the things, I look at you guys and how you've created companies, and you're still nerds at the end of the day. So this first part is kind of like a PSA for those that are nerds and hackers and maybe you want to create companies or maybe encourage those people to create companies.
Yeah, so starting off, Doug's elite. Like anytime you get a chance to steal 5 minutes from him, you should. He's worth talking to. But in general, yeah, I think more geeks should be creating companies, or at least not being afraid to throw hats in the ring. For a long time, we kind of had the feeling that we had to be out in the corner and business guys do business. And one of the things you kind of find out is that part of the reason current business practices suck so much is because the people who are doing them kind of do them by rote. And it doesn't have to be that way. Like, all of that stuff is just another system that can be hacked. So, and I think there's a new hope for this sort of stuff. You're starting to see, like, the Capsulate guys are a nice team of hackers making good. The Signal Sciences guys, the Duo guys, and I think more and more you're starting to see hackers, the Senrio guys, basically saying, hey, this is a system, we can hack it, like, we can build nice things. And this business stuff is just another system that we can learn, iterate, and optimize on. And yeah, I'd actively encourage it.
Haroon, what do you think that the biggest fear is? I think at the end of the day, it comes down to fear, really, in creating, being a hacker and being technical and creating a company. So
I'll tell you, I have some thoughts on it, and some of it are not what you think. Like people normally think it's, well, you're afraid of the business world, and for the most part, most of the tech guys that we know don't really lack for confidence that way. Like, you kind of pick a target and go for the target. One of the surprising things that I think is really tough to go from, certainly from doing offense to building a product, is a huge amount of subsuming your own ego. Because when you're a consultant, when you're a pen tester, you almost always, at least on the engagement, the smartest guy in the room. You get to walk in, you get to say clever things, you get to show people shells, and it's really hard to argue with you because here's the shell on your server, right. Here's your CEO's email. And when you go from that and then build a product, and now when you walk into that boardroom, you've got junior MBAs and someone who's 10 days out of college saying, actually, I think you made a mistake by making this button blue. This button really should be red. And you want his business. And so I think there's a huge leap that has to go from always being the smartest because you broke stuff to I made stuff, please accept my stuff. And I think you guys will know some of it, right? Like, or lots of it. When you put yourselves out there with a podcast or with a blog post, there's a moment of vulnerability because you basically create something, you create this child and you put it out into the world. And in part, I think that's good for more security people to do. I think it'll make us better security people also, because I think part of the problem security has had for a long time is a lack of empathy. And I think you can fake that empathy, like, hey, devs are people too, you should be cool with devs. But nothing teaches you empathy like actually having to make dev trade-offs, actually having to figure, do I spend my time on this or do I do this a certain way? Do I actually use langsec when I'm using a protocol, or am I just going to wing it with badly crafted HTTP and stuff into JSON objects? So yeah, I think all of that stuff is useful. I think building stuff makes us better hackers, and in truth, I think that hacking makes us better builders.
Haroon, are some of the fears, do you also believe, tied to, as technologists, we study a lot of different technology, we've seen a lot of technology trends, and we feel like someone's already done it before, or someone's already doing it today, so why bother throwing my hat in the ring?
Yeah, so I think that stuff's not limited to us, right? Like they talk about, they joke about economists, that an economist walks past $100 on the floor and doesn't pick it up because he says to himself, rationally, if there was $100 on the floor, someone would have picked it up. And I think there's a great deal of that. And I think for that, we are particularly bad because we do that in two ways. One is, like, visit Hacker News. And for almost any company that went on to be $1 billion company, you'll be able to find a post on Hacker News from some guy saying, what is this? I could build this with 10 lines of bash and the weekend. Like whether it's Twitter or whether it's Dropbox. And in InfoSec in particular, we see a lot of this. Like, oh, you're building your own SIEM? Like, no, I could totally do this with an elk stack in 5 minutes. And actually, part of the problem is there's a huge wealth of problems waiting, like CISOs waiting to throw money at someone who can make a problem go away. And instead, lots of the time in security, we look at things and go, I could build that, and maybe that becomes not worth paying for. I think that's changing. Like I think companies like ours are able to survive because that's changing. Like I think if that were the prevailing wisdom, you can make your own Geo. You can make your own two-factor auth pretty easily. You can make your own canaries. You can make your own WAF on Nginx and a whole bunch of stuff. But I think you're starting to see more aware security folks now who look at products and say, hey, I could totally use that as a piece in my pipeline. And I could build it, but I'd rather they build it and I focus on other things. And I think that's that's a sign of us maturing in some ways.
Matt?
Yeah. To your point, there's no better way to learn empathy, I believe, than to do a startup and watch it fail. Literally, because I did. The first one, to your point, Haroon, right? I knew what needed to be built. I knew the requirements. We built a great platform. We failed on sales and marketing. I wasn't the CEO of my own startup. And we watched it just kind of literally vanish. And you want to learn empathy. You want to learn business and what it means to become a business person and understand customer requirements and the value of sales and marketing. I mean, there's no better way to learn that ever. And look, I learned from that and continue to drive, work for a various number of startups and had some great success with some of those. But as a technologist at the time, because I've lost most of my technical brain now, I knew, if you have that vision, you have that that entrepreneur spirit. Do it. Now, and when you do your first one, you might hire somebody who has a little more business sense to help you through that transition. You'll learn through that experience whether it fails or succeeds, and it makes you better for the next one. And that's, to me, that was how I learned empathy very, very quickly.
Yeah, so empathy wise, it's super useful. But one of the big reasons why I think more of us should build companies is, look, the security ecosystem in many ways is broken for lots of things. And one of the reasons I think it's broken is because we've got vendors. We've got some vendors who behave badly, and largely the market can't tell the difference. And it's a pretty classic market for lemons problem, right? Which is eventually the smartest of us decide to leave the industry because staying in the industry, people can't tell the difference between a good product and bad. And we can do that. And in the classic market for lemons, what that results in is market failure. Or what you do is more good people get in there and throw their hat in the ring, and hopefully we can start having good products bubble up. And again, I'm increasingly hopeful. You starting to see good products come through. Like you mentioned our love page earlier, and it's one of the things that we're super proud of because all of that is unsolicited. We're not going out telling people, please tweet about us. People like our stuff enough to go out on Twitter and say this rocks. And on the one hand, we think it's a little bit sad that that's so uncommon because why do something if you can't generate love? But on the other, we really pleased with it. Like it keeps us going.
It was one of the big drivers for Doug Song over at
Duo.
Yeah, Duo, right? I mean, it was all about that connection with the customer. Customers loved the product. They raved about it. And he instilled that kind of that community around what Duo was doing. Look, he had a fantastic exit with Duo to Cisco.
Right.
That's an understatement.
But he believed in that, and he really wanted to make that customer experience. Customers just loved what he was doing, and that's great because that means people are using it. They're getting value out of it, and they want to continue to tell other people about it.
Well, and I think there's two struggles there, Matt. Where I was going was, one of the things that we've always said about the security industry is that the vendors that have the best technology, the coolest tech, aren't always the ones that end up being a category king in any given subcategory.
They're not always
in
the
security.
one that win. Yeah.
It's usually the ones that have the better sales and marketing, or in this case, customer service, which is great. But usually it's the ones that have better sales and marketing and have good technology. But there's usually others in the category that have friggin' fantastic technology that makes us nerds jump up and down for joy. But unfortunately, they don't win. So Haroon, is it more about not just throwing your hat in the ring, but also having some way to teach everyone what good sales and marketing really means?
Yeah, so I think there's two things there, and again, lots of the stuff I'm talking about with a handful of data points, so your mileage will vary. But on the one hand, I think that stuff is changing. I think the whole way that enterprise buying works is changing, and it used to be that if you wanted to sell to the enterprise, you needed a version of strippers and steaks and sales guys who'd go in and spend a week and wine and dine the customer and then walk away with a 7-digit contract.
That was really a thing. You're right. Absolutely.
It was. Absolutely. Yeah. And I know who some of those guys still are.
It totally was. And to some extent, that stuff still exists. Like the company just comes out of the gate. The technology still has warts, but it blankets every airport that you land in, and it's in every in-flight magazine. And maybe the technology gets better, but right now it doesn't deserve that sort of carpet bombing advertisement. And that stuff still kind of works. But what you're also seeing is before IT wakes up and approves it, there's 10 different Slacks running in your company, because Slack was so useful that 10 people swiped a credit card and put it in. And before it's been approved at a higher level, small parts of your org are already running Duo. And in our case, we've got orgs where like 3 different parts of the org are running Canary. And you start to see that stuff where there's a combination of things. One is the products are built differently, so they get that bottom-up acceptance. And the other is you're starting to see more empowered engineers. So the purchase doesn't just happen with the CIO anymore. You have engineers who have TOEFL limits or something like that, and they're able to bring this technology in, test the technology, make sure that it works for them, and then pull it up into the org. And I think that's pretty win-win, because it avoids one of the big moats that the big companies used to have before. And one of the things about moats like that is they make people lazy. So historically, if you spoke to VCs or if you spoke to business folks, they tell you like, you don't get it, kid. Like, you don't need to be the best product. You just need to have the most feet on the ground. And like, we've got a sales team of one. And at this point, we've got a ton of customers. Like, we've got customers just on all 7 continents, like including Antarctica. And the only reason that works is if our customers are good advocates for us. And the only way customers are good advocates for us is if we continually try hard and don't suck. And so you start to see the hope for a positive feedback loop where instead of heading towards market failure, you're now heading towards a loop where we incentivized to work harder. Customers are incentivized to keep us alive because they want more of the stuff. And that's kind of nirvana. That's kind of where you want to go to.
Yeah, right. I mean, Haroon, you're making it sound easy, right? But it's not, because having great technology is hard. Having great customer service is hard. And the other thing you talked about was having a good product market fit and go-to-market strategy, right? And I mean, if you could do those things well, you're going to have a successful company.
Totally with you. So again, none of it is easy, and none of it like everyone's got sucky days or sucky weeks. But I think it's now more possible than it used to be. So we first like our team is still pretty small. Like there's just about 16 of us in the company, and we've got hundreds and hundreds of customers at this point. But if you told me 10 years ago that a company with 10 people would have customers on all 7 continents and more than 1,000 servers, like that stuff was dodgy. But now we're starting to accept that, right? You're starting to accept Instagram with 14 people that's generating $1 billion worth of value, and WhatsApp with 20 engineers actually handling the market. And it's a good time to be a hacker. Yeah. Like all of that stuff is on the table. Like how we manage our servers, cool. 5 guys can manage 10,000 boxes. Yay automation. How you handle your go-to-market, we can hack that. It's a good time to throw your hat in.
Agreed.
Yeah, and one of the areas where your point comes across more than anything is the DevOps movement, right? Engineers are making decisions about the technology they're embedding into their DevOps process, and it's not going to a higher level in most cases. They've got the ability to make those decisions, and so the ability to now get technology into the hands of engineers and build that bottom up. DevOps is a perfect motion.
You guys are, Haroon and Matt are very yin and yang, right? Because what Matt's talking about, right, is the engineer has some level of budget. Your product has to be at a low enough cost so that they can acquire it. And what Haroon just said was, we can build companies now with less people, which means less overhead, which means that this is a happy marriage.
Yeah, it's a good way to go. And in fact, recently I said something like I'll get a little bit of hate for. And I was saying that I actually think that the traditional VC model actually hurts the security ecosystem a little bit, because one of the reasons bad companies, there's multiple reasons for it, but one of the reasons bad companies get to exist as long as they do in the ecosystem is because the VC model, which works really well for consumer startups, kind of hits a snag when they're doing security startups. So if you throw your money behind a Friendster. So a VC invests in Friendster, Friendster gets built up, and either Friendster sinks or it swims. And if Friendster manages to get the customers, then people sign up for it and they get subsequent rounds of funding. In the security space, customers find it so hard to distinguish between good products and bad products that as a proxy, they go for, are you a legit product? So
Right.
people will buy a product because there's 10 salesmen and because they saw it at the airport and because it was an in-flight magazine. I mean, how can you be junk? You've got a slogan everywhere as you land at SFO. Like this must be a legit thing. And it's a little self-fulfilling because a VC looks at a product and says, okay, I think people need this machine learning malware stopper. Let me invest 10 squillion in it. And now the guy's got 10 squillion, so he buys those ads and buys a sales team. And he gets his first sales because he's got those things. And now the VC has to reinvest for round 2. And he bases his decision on, well, do you have customers? And that thing allows a bad company to last 2 or 3 cycles longer than they should. And again, that's not the VC's problem. We've still got a fundamental problem in InfoSec where there's not enough people who can distinguish between good products and bad, or products that we actually need versus products that have some blinking lights. But certainly the influx of capital into it doesn't help. And right now, everyone knows that the cybers are hot. And so you've got stupid money entering it. Like everyone who's got a hint of a VC fund is looking for someone who wants to build a cybersecurity company. And there, I'd give caution to all my hacker friends that say, like, if you're building a company, don't go that route too early. Like build your product, get product market fit. You don't need a lot of capital. There's some businesses where you do, like you can't build a Cloudflare unless someone's put a basquillion into you, I guess. But for example, we built, and our first devices, we literally shipped hardware, right? And even that, like, we were able to scale costs as customers paid for it. So we were buying servers as customers needed it, and we were building hardware as customers needed it. And the market will tolerate that stuff a lot better these days than it used to. And it gives you a good, sustainable way to build a business.
Yeah, Haroon, you bring up a really good point on the investor side, because there are some really good cybersecurity venture capital funds out there that understand the market, the product market fit, where your technology fits in, and will be there for the long haul, where some of the other VCs may not. They don't understand the nuances of security. They're looking to invest to that concept of dumb money, right? There's a stage in a startup's life when you go get the additional money because you need that next scale. But I've always been very cautious about who's that initial investor, and do they understand you to make you successful and succeed in the security market. And there are a number of really good cybersecurity VCs that understand that and are much better positioned if you're going to become a founder.
Yeah, totally makes sense. And at this point, there's enough other ex-hackers in the wind that I say ex-hackers, or even current hacker founders in the wind, that'll help out. Like one of the things that traditionally VCs used to bring is a wealth of experience, right? You're out there building your company for the first time, and you don't know, like, how does this actually work? Do I need something before I can sell to a big Fortune 100? And nowadays, with Twitter and with social media, you can pretty easily reach out and you'll get a Doug Song, a John Oberheide, Zane Lackey, who'll happily give you 5 minutes to go, hey, this is how it looked when we did it. Why don't you try X? And so again, I think one of those things that were traditionally gate kept, like you needed access to a VC for it. We're starting to have community resources now that can pull you through those phases.
I want to transition into technology. A lot of our audience members do know what Canary is and how it works, and we've talked a lot about you need good technology. Haroon, what's your technology all about, and how'd you come to find it and build it?
Right. So one of the things that we say about our technology, and we say it kind of flippantly, is that we kind of the dumbest product you can get that actually works. And in part we say it and we kind of proud of it because we don't do fancy machine learning. We don't do any of that stuff, although we reasonably position for it.
I see. I was excited. I thought you were going to say you had a machine learning malware stopper. That's going to be like my next product. I'm going to call it machine learning malware stopper.
The working title. No. So what we go for instead, like we spend an incredible amount of engineering time, and I'm talking about like completely engineer years on making our product as simple as possible. And so we've got a crazy amount of effort behind making sure that there's almost no friction. So a step back, like what Canary fundamentally is honeypots that you can deploy in minutes. And I'll say two things on this. The one is, traditionally, honeypots have kind of picked up a bad rep. And I know you guys with offensive countermeasures and all of that are fans. But there was a time, like honeypots went through the cycle, right? In the early 2000s, Know Your Enemy series were great, and Lance Spitzner and Fyodor from Nmap and a whole bunch of really smart people did the HoneyNet project. And I think we took a wrong turn at some point, because honeypots got classified as a research project and a way to study your opponent. And so people started going like, if you have time, then use honeypots to study what attackers are doing. And of course, the truth is, we know what attackers are doing these days. Like, you can't open a newspaper without seeing what attackers are doing. Like studying your attacker like that is not what most industries need to do. And where we see the value of honeypots largely, like our company is aimed at reliable breach detection. So we pitch Canary as the cheapest, quickest way to detect badness on your network. And our logic is we've spent a lot of time shaving the product. So literally, even on super complex networks, and for the tech geeks amongst us, like I can talk about some of the stuff we do, but essentially, even if you're a super, super unsophisticated user, Canary is useful 4 minutes after you deploy it on a network. So you get a box, you drop it, within 4 minutes, it's there. And then one of the fortuitous things, and one of the reasons why I think hackers should build companies, is sometimes you get lucky with some things. And for example, one of the things that we got super lucky with is we built our first canaries, and we go through a lot of effort. So if you take a canary and say, I want you to be an IBM mainframe, then it runs services that look like a mainframe, and its TCP/IP stack fingerprint is a mainframe. And if you term to it, you get a mainframe login. And if you make it a Cisco, its stack fingerprint is Cisco, and its services are Cisco. And in truth, that's not super necessary. When Snowden was bouncing from box to box, he was just looking for open shares. Like, if the share was a dodgy Samba share, he didn't go, oh, let me not take the PDFs from this thing.
Right.
And this happens in enterprises too. And as attackers, we kind of often think of technologies in terms of, can it be defeated in the lab? Like way back during the early HoneyNet project, there was a product tool called Sebek. This dates me a little bit, but Sebek was a BSD kernel logger. So you rootkit yourself, and it logs all of the syscalls so that you put it on a host, and when that host gets owned, while the attacker is doing his stuff, Sebek is pushing off all his commands because of kernel logging. And if I remember right, Sebek demoed at a CanSec West, and the next CanSec West, someone else did a talk on how to detect Sebek with kernel timing. And that's totally cool. It's totally awesome that it can be done. But again, 99%, 100% of your attackers, when they land on your box, are not timing syscalls to see if Sebek is running on it. And if you had Sebek running on it, you would have caught that attacker. And if the NSA were running it, they would have caught Snowden. And so we've got to get out of this thing where we make perfect the enemy of good enough. And so going back to Canary, we do all the stuff, and we put a lot of work into making it believable, even if it's not really necessary. And then we get a little bit lucky, because one of the things that we really lucked out on, we used to teach a class at Black Hat for many, many years as SensePost for how to break into networks.
I remember that, yeah.
And one of the things we used to spend, we used to spend a disproportionate amount of time teaching people how to footprint and fingerprint organizations. And when we used to give it as a 5-day class, 2.5 days we'd spend teaching people how to footprint an organization, right? It's why Multigo came out of Roelof from SensePost, because footprinting is what we do. And one of the things we used to teach people was, if you on an internal network and you see a whole bunch of Windows servers, and then you see one Solaris server, go for the Solaris server. Because chances are this company has figured out, and they locked down their Windows and they've got Windows admins, but they had to get a Sunbox to run their disk station or to run their SAN storage.
Or it came from a vendor that was providing one specific thing, and
exactly.
the vendor put software on it and was like, you can never upgrade it because our software will break, and you can just write us our check and then we go away.
Exactly right. So now that box is R-hostable and R-loginable. And when you get on, you actually find that the admins use the same password, or there's a Samba password. But there's an interesting thing here, and we totally got lucky with this. It means that if you take a canary and put in the time to make it really blend into your environment, then you're doing something clever and attackers will hit it. But if you take it and drop it in really stupidly so that it sticks out, turns out attackers are going to hit it. and
I like that you're not afraid to call it a honeypot, because a lot of people in this space, they don't like the term honeypot because of the reasons you described. But you're like, no, it's a honeypot, and it's effective because of the stories you just told. Yeah.
No, it's totally so. Our thing is, honeypots are a good idea that got a bad rap, and for breach detection, like I've had a few discussions with really smart people who default to, well, you shouldn't do honeypots till you've done everything else in the org. Like first you do this, and first you do asset management, and first you do a SIEM. And I'm like, listen, I would buy that if we were going to add more work for you. But literally, you give us $10,000 and literally 4 minutes of your time, and you've got a reliable indication when someone owns your DMZ, or when someone's on your server network, or when someone's on your CFO's network. And this is our whole pitch, right? Which is, go do your SIEM project, which is going to take you 3 years, and your DLP project, which never ends. And while you're doing all those things, do this for 10K. And even if you give it no thought at all, take them in their default state and drop them down. I'm willing to bet you're going to get value from it, because within 3 months, you're going to get a ping at 3 a.m. when you find out that actually your WAN router just accessed the files on your Canary SMB share. And at that point, everything changes, right? Because now you've got something to go back to the org and say, listen, we thought we needed a budget of X, but look at what's happening at 3 a.m. We need a budget of NX. Or something that says, we thought that SIEM was priority 1, but actually we're leaking in our DMZ. Someone needs to go fix this thing first. So
Haroon, I want to play devil's advocate for a moment. In the SMB Samba share example, right? Well, what prevents a legitimate user from getting curious, browsing the network, and tripping the honeypot, causing, in that sense, false positives? I mean, false positive might be the wrong word, but a false positive.
Totally a good question, and totally something that that does happen. And there's two things, right? There's one is you can spend more time making it more hidden. So put an SMB share, put a canary up on the CFO's network, and map a drive from the CFO's machine to the canary, so that now when someone owns your CFO and checks out his X drive, they see it going to /backup and they touch it. And at that point, there's no doubt there's badness. And on the other hand, there's somebody went into AD and found 2019 projections, and then went into 2019 salaries, and then went into exec salaries and copied exec salaries.xls. It's not a false positive. Like, to go have a discussion with Bob.
Right.
Like, so there's that. But there's also the thing, and this goes a little bit more to something I was talking about earlier, which is a bit of a philosophical thing. I think in security, because we've had products that were just crap, in terms of giving us 10,000 alerts, we sometimes go too far in the other direction. So I'll start off by saying we've got customers with more than 100 canaries on their networks that in a year get 5 alerts. And we know this because they speak to us, and when they renew and they say, listen, last year we had 5 alerts, 3 of them were staff poking around, and 2 of them were actual unofficial pen tests, meaning they got owned by someone. So already the noise level is not 10 alerts per day, it's maybe 10 alerts per year, but you're looking at less than that. But my philosophical point is, I don't think that people should treat false positives, if the volumes are that low, as that big a problem. Like, you got somebody access the share at noon, you check, and it's Vicky, the sysadmin, and Vicky says, oh yeah, I saw this box and I mapped to it and checked it. And you go, cool, Vicky, let's move on. Like, that's perfectly fine. And again, canaries are made to be silent, so it's not everybody every day. And if you're getting hit, like your staff have another problem, like you need to give them actual work so they're not browsing around random servers in AD. But for the most part, that's my take on it, is we shouldn't be that anti false positives. So one of the other things pre-canary that I've used in a talk for many moons, I've said to people, listen, every pen test that we did as SensePost, where we ended up as domain admin, and that's most of them, like, you'd go back with the report weeks later, and people don't know that you added user Bob Smith as a domain administrator.
Yep.
And that's a ridiculous.
Of course, that's completely changed today, right, Larry? Job?
No.
No. Yes.
We only add our own accounts as domain admin now, just as the as the the flop your man meat out on the table, and.
Oh, I gotta say, I do have a habit of literally dropping one of my accounts into the domain admins group just to see how quickly they would react, if at all. And for the last few times, and this may be a testimony to our customers, I've got a phone call within 20 minutes.
That's cool.
That is exactly 20 minutes too long. Because it's over by then. It's all over by then, man.
Well, it's true, but they did notice.
It's trivially solvable, and it should be solved, right? And if you tell people, look, why don't you just add a one-line script that mails you when a new user is added to domain admins? And one of the gut reactions you'll get back is, well, what happens when it's a legit user? And the answer is, when it's a legit user, you look at the mail and delete it. Like,
that's right. Or you go hunt down the junior sysadmin that did it, and you delete him.
Yeah.
Or you go, hey, look, the script still works.
Yeah. And along those lines, Larry, I want to go back to something Haroon said, and that was, with the Canary product, you may get 5 alerts a year, right? And typically when I deploy something, being the kind of suspicious, skeptical security person, I'm like, is that really working? But if it's sending me alerts, a couple a day, 100 a day, 100 a week, I'm like, like it's working. It's doing stuff. Now, all those 100 for that week are false positives, and I've spent the time to verify that each and every single one of them are false positives.
At least for the first week.
I kind of feel good when I go home for the weekend that, like, I looked at stuff, it was generating alerts, they're all false positives.
And then the second week, you ignore all those messages.
Yes,
and then when the real things happen,
then I create a filter to filter out all the false positives. But I feel good about it, and I think, Haroon, you made me realize that's not the only way to feel good about something that's protecting your network.
Yeah, it's a super interesting thing. So that's actually something we bumped into, and it's interesting because we bump into it mainly when we talk to business guys, and business guys will say, well, hold on, like, you're putting this product on the customer's network, and your aim is to be as quiet as possible. Like, they're not going to renew you in year 2 because you didn't show any value,
right?
And like, genuinely, legitimately, at this point, with hundreds of customers, we've had one customer spring that line on us, and the customer was actually trying to pay less in year 2, and essentially it's make of it what you will. It's a Swiss bank that came back to us and said, hey, listen, your product was really silent last year, and we're not sure if we should renew. And we went like, look, silence is kind of what we go for. Can we check this out? And we check it out, and we're like, hey, listen, in May, it threw an alarm, and they're like, yeah, that was when we had our pen testers, and you caught our pen testers. But other than that, it was silent. And we're like, that's what we say on the tin. Like that's us working like we should. So we silent the rest of the year, and when your pen testers were in, they were caught. And they were fully fine. Like they were just their purchasing department angling for because that's what they do.
Sure, but that's their job to do that in the purchasing department, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But by and large, most of our customers actually appreciate the fact, and it's worth mentioning that it's something else that's I think fairly unique about what we've done with Canary. Like we've got a dashboard and all of that, but we don't care if you never go to it. Like our aim is on day one, you go in, put in your email address or put in your phone number to get a text or aim it at your SIM or something like that. But we don't want to be your one pane of glass, and we don't want to be the center of your universe. Like our pitch is, we cheap and we quick. Drop us in today and forget about us, and never look at us again until we beep. And when we beep, you should probably cancel your plans, because chances are it's something to look at. And so far, that's like, again, you never know till you try. But it's kind of struck a chord with customers. So for the most part, customers like it, and then customers tell other customers, and that kind of works.
Now,
for us.
Larry and Joff, do you worry that you'll get tripped up or caught by some type of honeypot or deception technology?
No.
No, typically not. And I was just going to suggest, though, you need to add a feature that and call it the add value feature. So when the customer calls in and says, hey, we're having a problem, it's not making any noise, you can just dial up a button. It's like, look again.
Push a button and it hits it. Yeah. In terms of you guys not worrying about hitting one, so we've got empirical evidence now, right? Like we around in enough places, and so we've caught enough pen testers, and part of the stuff that you hit becomes part of the question of how you do stuff, and you'll see two things happen. The one is, if you know that a network is canaried, for example. So some people, you go out and you check our /love page, and you see a customer saying, yes, we're now running Canary, and so now you on that customer, and you find a AWS API token. Do you use it?
Well, you haven't described for us in the audience what the tokens are, which goes back to our previous conversation of like, how do I get this in the cloud and all my containers and in my applications? And really, essentially, the answer came down to, Haroon, is that tokens are the way to do that.
Yeah. So we'll hit tokens, but that concept is consistent, right? Like if you know this company is running Canary, and now you see an open share called network diagrams, to show your age again and go back to speed, what do you do, hotshot? Like do you not grab it? Like when we pen testing and there's a chance to grab network diagrams, you take them, but now you're second guessing. That's entirely dodgy looking. And anyone who's pen tested will tell you a squillion times where they found creds in stupid places.
Yep.
Like you box, and it's a strange box, and they tried an X server, and oh look, the X server has passwords for a box on the domain in a text file.
You know what's funny though? A lot of time when I was pen testing, that I would find them tell the customer, "Hey, like I found these credentials," and they're like, those are old credentials. They're nowhere it will work in our environment." And I'm like, "Can I try?" And they're like, "Yeah, go ahead and try." And then you own their whole environment. I mean, you guys have all done that as well, right?
And they work. And then while you're trying, they're like,
quick, change the password. Change it.
It's how ownage happens, right? Like if you guys are pen testing with any sort of frequency, and this is one of those information asymmetry problems, because companies think that they defend themselves with zero-day protection and fileless malware detection. But actually, they're getting owned because of creds.txt, which still has valid creds to a server, which is still trusted on the domain, which then allows Mimikatz to run. And even if we're getting a handle and getting better at this part of the problem, we're miles from that part of the problem, which is why attacking networks is not that much harder now than it was in the early 2000s. Like you're on a network, and it's hours or days to domain admin if you even need it. And yeah, it's
So,
that stuff
Haroon,
that
I have a question, and it's a very specific question, right? Because I've been doing a lot of programming lately. A lot of it interfaces with APIs, and if you've ever interfaced with an API, you have to authenticate, right? Usually, that means unless you've got some kind of credential vault, that you're ending up with some kind of JSON file, which essentially has, I mean, it's not a username and password, right? It's a client ID and secret and a token inside there. If that's a canary token, how do you know when an attacker's done something with it or accessed it?
Yeah. So let's transition quickly to canary tokens, and I'll explain that one because the one that we do for AWS is particularly cute. It's a stolen idea from the folks at Atlassian, but it's a cool idea. So if canaries, with canaries, our pitch is you take this thing and you make it an operating system. And again, the pitch is 4 minutes, and you've got a Windows box, a OS 10 box. If you've got a SCADA network, you make it a Siemens PLC, and it'll talk Modbus. So the logic is 4 minutes, you drop it, you forget about it, and it'll tell you somebody just tried to talk valid Modbus to me and they shouldn't have. And so you put that on the one corner. And then what we did is we created canary tokens, which for years and years, we've been telling people, everyone's been telling people, use honey tokens. Like if you've got a database of credit card information, put in a credit card for Bob Zander 111. And if you ever see Bob Zander 111 go on the wire, something's wrong. You've been owned. And the logic sounds good, except in practice, you can't. Like you need to find a way to hook in to your database stream so you can see Bob Zander passing on the wire. Or you need, and so it falls into that thing where we gave people advice that actually wasn't super actionable. And with canary tokens, what we did is we said, let's make a way to make all of that stuff trivially doable. And so at its simplest, with canary tokens, you come to us. So there's 3 things worth mentioning here. We have our paid canary tokens. Everyone who's a canary customer gets their own canary token server, and we'll talk about that in a sec. But we also, if somebody goes to canarytokens.org, what you'll see is we host a canary token server for people. And like that thing's been used, it's currently used by something like over 100,000 people. And so essentially what you do there is you go to canarytokens.org and you say, here's my email address, paul@paul.com. And you put in a reminder that says, this is the token that I'm leaving on my mom's desktop. And then you create a fake Word doc. And so the token server gives you this Word doc and you put it on your mom's machine. And the joy of canary tokens is that the alert is self-identifying. So if you take that and put it on your mom's machine, you're now in a position to put 1,000 of them, right? Mom's Dropbox, mom's box account, mom's laptop, mom's desktop, and forget about it. And in 2 years, when you get a message telling you somebody accessed the Word doc on mom's desktop or on mom's Dropbox, now you go and look for it. And the first 2 versions of that are dead simple, right? We'll give you a URL string. And if someone visits that URL string, we'll tell you the reminder that you wanted to get. So again, mom's desktop. And the second one is we'll give you a DNS name. And if anyone resolves that DNS name, we'll tell you someone just resolved it. And both of those are 2 minutes worth of development time. But with those 2 primitives, you can start making really interesting tokens. So now you can make a Word doc that alerts you when it's opened, or a PDF that alerts you when it's open. Or you can create a a little bit of JavaScript code that tells you when your website is running on someone else's infrastructure. So we've got a big social media company or communication company, and they had really top class pen testers in, and initially they caught those guys doing a red team exercise on day one because those guys hit a canary. And on the second engagement, a quarter later, the team said, well, how do we beat day one? And actually, they caught them the week before the engagement started, because this company runs canary tokens on all of their public websites. And effectively, those guys cloned the website for a phishing campaign. And so they got their ping saying, hey, this website is now running at securitycompany.net. And so they managed to beat that. And one of the tokens, the one you mentioned, that's worth explaining, is tokens can be as simple as we give you a unique URL, and when someone goes to it, we tell you someone went to it. And even there, right? If you think about it for a second, something that'll be up you guys' alley, or at least that's just going to sound dirty. Is something
Perfect.
Something that you guys would be keen on is on my home network, all of my Linksys routers, I say, because we are officially one with the Queen, but you guys would say routers. The Linksys logo on all of my routers is actually a served Canary token. So it's a token where essentially we upload an image to the Canary token server, and the token server says, okay, I'll serve this image for you. And whenever I serve it, I'll tell you it's Haroon's Wi-Fi extender, or it's Haroon's primary Linksys. And so now I just put those on all of my devices at home. And you guys can imagine, take the device, take the thing, unsquash it, put it in. And what it now means is that I get a ping that tells me someone just logged on to your Wi-Fi extender, or someone's just logged on to your router. And again, with tokens, what you're looking at are tiny tripwires. Where canaries were entire operating systems, tokens become tiny tripwires that allow you to tripwire stuff. And I'll give two more examples just because it's a good example of simple but effective. The one, if you go back to talk about that simple URL, right? And you would think, I'm smarter than that. Like, I'm a lead hack, so I'm not going to get caught by a URL. But here's the thing. Most orgs running Slack, at some point, someone's going to own someone in their company and then go into their Slack and read their Slack history. And either they're going to mine it for passwords, or they're going to mine it for interesting stuff. And most orgs have no way of even knowing that this is going to happen, or it's happening. And so here you see a simple place where what you can do is go into your Slack and go into a conversation that happened 3 months ago, and where you said, hey, good morning, people. Change that line to, hey, folks, here's the password for the 2019 financials URL. And forget about it. And what's going to happen is when someone gets compromised, the attacker is going to go into their Slack and search for the word password. And he's going to see that and go score and click on it. And you've now got that first piece of thread that you can pull on that tells you something bad is happening in your org. And again, everything that we do, whether it's Canary or Canary tokens, is aimed at, can we do simple hacks that give you high fidelity information that badness is going on? And so the last thing I'll say is you asked about the API token. It's a really nice hack. And what's happening in the background? So one of our tokens is, you come to the token server and you say you want an AWS API token. And again, put in Paul's machine, put in Larry's machine as the memos. And so we'll give you one token for Paul and one for Larry, and you install those on your machine. And when an attacker owns you and sees that API key, he tries to use it, and you get a message saying, someone from this IP address using this browser just tried to access the token that you installed in Paul's home directory. Again, it's such a high quality IDS, and it costs you nothing, right? Like, if you go do it off our Canary token server right now, it's literally $0. And so you should go do this for every desktop in your org, because why not? Like, what's the false positive that Paul accidentally uses the fake API key on his machine. And for technical background, what we're doing to make that work is we create an AWS account that we pay for, and in it we create AWS API keys and defang them so that even if someone uses it, there's nothing they can do.
Mm-hmm.
And then we turn on logging to the max so we can tell when someone uses that key. And then all we've got to do is essentially glue it all together and say, like, okay, we gave this key to Paul. Paul wanted this reminder. When someone uses this key, based on the logs, we can see that it's Paul's key and Paul wanted that reminder. But again, it's so in the back, it's kind of this Rube Goldberg machine of multiple systems working behind at Amazon. But for you, it's 2 seconds. It's go to Canary Tokens, put in an email address, say you want the API key, and now you've got it. And when someone uses it, you'll know. And again, there's lots of little things like that. To go philosophical again, I think that we underestimate the value of hacks for defense. Like I think for a long time, we've kind of conditioned ourselves to thinking that, like years ago, you'd read a college textbook and it'll tell you that the CIO's question is whether you buy technology or whether you build technology, and all the arguments for and against. And one of the things that we see in InfoSec is that attackers are used to building stuff on the fly and hacking solutions on the fly. And defenders, for the most part, still expect bought solutions to be slick and work. And when the floor under you is liquid or not stable, it seems like what you need is more hacks win. and currently the hacks are from attackers.
That was really prolific, Haroon. That was really that was
He said it was
deep.
gonna be philosophical.
Yeah, that was deep.
I try. You guys have the cigars. No, I genuinely think that we need to bring that back. And again, it sounds weird because I'm a vendor and I'm now telling you that you need more internal hacks, but you'll notice that stuff informs our design decisions. So we're not trying to be everything in one. We're trying to be a Unix tool which says we do this one thing and we do it really well, and we'll play with your seam and we'll ingest stuff. So we become a good Unix utility, which is you fit us in and we play nicely with the other things in your tool. We're not trying to be all of your attention. We're trying to be a useful tool for you.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Very good.
Haroon, I don't know that you have ever played 5 Questions with Security Weekly.
I haven't, and I am afraid.
I was going to say, I think the last time Haroon was on, we didn't have 5 questions.
5 questions. So Haroon,
So that's been a while.
Are you ready to play 5 Questions with Security Weekly?
I guess I'm as ready as I'm going to be.
It's a really easy game. There's 5 questions. There is no right or wrong answer, and one of the questions is multiple choice with only 2 choices.
So you have a 50% shot
There you go.
of getting it either wrong or right. Wait,
This
there's
is
no
true.
Let's do it.
So, question 1, 3 words to describe yourself.
Curious, persistent, and annoying.
Question 2, if you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
Holy shit.
That's a great answer.
Does the Pope bless it before you use it?
It's like a poop in the shape of a cross.
Come on, to
That's been hardened
But the
into
Pope
a
has to
point.
bless it for it to be
Yes.
holy.
Unless it's his own.
Yes. So I've done a few years of knife fighting. So I guess I'd be stabbing people.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the question be? Well, what would the title be? Sorry.
That's odd.
In the popular game of Ask Grabby Grabby, do you prefer to go first or second? See, I told you it was easy. Multiple choice, only 2 options.
The answer is yes.
I like that
Haroon, choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
answer. Alive, dead, fictional, or otherwise.
or even Bollywood?
Richard Feynman and my mom.
Huh.
Great
Oh wait,
answers.
that's cheating, isn't it? You can't choose your own mother.
Guess you can.
Sure you can.
He
In
might,
Haroon's
he might
Yeah.
listen to this, and I think it's gonna suck if I replace her with someone, and I genuinely
It's smart.
can't think of anyone I'd like to
Smart.
replace her with.
Yeah,
Joff,
that's a smart
remember,
one.
there are no right or wrong answers.
And
there
Joff-
are just
Oh, that's
answers.
And Joff, Haroon's mom is in fact a celebrity. We never
There
said
you go.
who it had to be a celebrity to.
That's right.
You know, my mom's a
Exactly.
celebrity.
I
to
mean,
me.
we're even pretty loose with the rules. It doesn't really need to be a celebrity.
Oh, because everybody's a celebrity if you want them to
Yeah,
be.
exactly.
I'm
Fight
a
the
rock
power.
star in my
I'm
own
with you
mind.
guys.
Haroon, thank you so much. Where can people find out more about Canary tokens, some URLs
So-
for our audience? We've got securityweekly.com/canary, so you can go there. And then your
Or
direct
just hit
websites.
Canary.tools. So canary.tools is our URL. So on the Twitters, we @thinkstcanary. Between both of those, you'll find what you need. Or just ping me and tell me why I'm stupid, or tell me that I've got a nasal voice. We always keen to hear from people.
Well, I love your voice, and I loved this segment. It was awesome. It was nice speaking with you again, Haroon. With that, we will take a short break, come back with our next interview with Guru. Stay tuned.
Let the team at Black Hills Information Security test your defenses. With over 10 years of experience in penetration testing, red teaming, and threat hunting, the testers at Black Hills will help you find the holes in your security before the bad guys do. The team at Black Hills cares about educating and sharing their knowledge by creating countless blogs, open source tools, and webcasts for you to learn more about the tradecraft of pen testing and red teaming. Visit securityweekly.com/BHIS to join their mailing list and view the latest blogs and webcasts from Black Hills Information Security. Recorded Future. They help security teams make more confident decisions faster. Recorded Future's technology automates broad collection and analysis of cyber threat data and delivers the rich external context you need to understand alerts and emerging threats. With real-time threat intelligence from Recorded Future, security teams respond to threats 63% faster and find undetected threats 10 times quicker. To get started, go to recordedfuture.com/securityweekly and sign up for the Recorded Future Cyber Data. Every day, you'll receive an email with the top results for trending technical indicators, cyber news, exploited vulnerabilities, suspicious IP addresses, and more. Subscribe today and stay ahead of cyber attacks. Endgame's converged endpoint security platform is transforming security programs. Their people, processes, and technology with the most powerful endpoint protection and simplest user experience, ensuring analysts of any skill level can stop targeted attacks before information theft. Endgame unifies prevention, detection, and threat hunting to stop known and unknown attacker behaviors at scale with a single agent. For more information, visit endgame.com.
Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly, where we're burning cigars pretty slow, drinking wine a little faster than we're smoking the cigars. A couple of quick announcements before we get started. The Layer 8 conference has 2 tracks of talks on social engineering and open source intelligence gathering. The conference is the only one of its kind. It will be held on Saturday, June 8th in Providence, Rhode Island, right here in our home state. Check out the Mental Health Hackers Village, the tool Lockpick Village, and a CTF hosted by Trace Labs. All that and more at layer8conference.com. We hope to see you there. We'll be there all day recording shows, and many of us will be giving talks. So Patrick Laverty is someone who I've worked with for a really long time. We worked together at the university and have done a lot of different things in the security community together. So yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. Our guest request form, that's right. If you watch or listen to the show and you're like, I really wish the Security Weekly folks would interview this person, we hear you. You can go to securityweekly.com/guests. You can enter your suggestions, and we've already received a lot of suggestions and have converted those into interviews on the show already. So keep it coming. I think it's absolutely fantastic.
Agreed.
And I just want to thank those people who have been writing in and saying you want to interview me. Love you.
Yeah. We'll do that. We will do that at some point, Jeff.
Wait, people have been writing in and asking for that?
It's Joff with his scripts.
Joff is just going to. He's hacked the guest request form.
Python
and he's just got his
learning.
Python shell script just running constantly.
Man, I got some artificial intelligence on that.
That's right.
You'll note that I didn't do it this time.
Right.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say this time. Normally, that's your gig, Larry.
Yeah,
Right.
no, only John Strand versus John Strand.
That's it. Our interview is not Joff. It's actually Guru. He's the founder and CEO of Cloudneeti, a software as a service company focused on continuous cloud security, data privacy, and compliance assurance. You can find out more at cloudneeti.com/securityweekly. That's cloudneeti.com. Guru, welcome to the show.
Hey guys, good afternoon, good evening.
Yes, nice to have you.
Cigar smoking folks. Happy to be here.
Yes, it's that relaxed environment that we like to bring people into and talk about technology. And I'm excited to talk about the technology that you've built. So, Guru, I guess start by telling the story of why you founded the company, how you founded the company to solve this problem that we have with cloud and cloud applications.
Oh, absolutely. So in about 2016 or so, we were working with a couple of enterprises in a consulting space, trying to help them have secure architectures, migrate their data centers over to the public cloud, but more focused on getting their architectures, their deployment working on Azure and AWS. And about 3 or 4 enterprises approached us, almost in a span of about 4 to 5 months time, asking us on how do we get visibility kind of a centralized dashboard for their security posture. And then one of the auditors came in and said, hey, we are actually working with these enterprises. Can you also overlay a compliance overview on top of it? So one thing led to the other. Some of these projects started getting converted into some quick starts, and over a period of time, we built a product around it.
And Guru, what I love about that story is that you really started with people coming to you with a problem. And like, there is no better situation to start a company.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's realizing that there's people out there with this problem and you could build a solution is just a beautiful beginning to a company.
Well, you might actually say that, but that we saw it much differently. They came to us saying, not so much from a product standpoint, that they knew that we've been doing such work in the space. Microsoft and AWS connected us to these customers, and the request did not come in as, hey, can you go build something? It came in very, very weird. So, hey, we already have Azure deployment and AWS deployment. We have no idea whether we should go to production with it. The CISOs came in and they say that they will not sign off, on something that they have no idea about. And it was a very unique situation where the CISOs actually blocked, production, releases, and that's where we were called in. More of an emergency fix on how would the enterprises actually find the visibility of their security posture. So it came in with a very weird way,
right?
But it came in over and over, and we realized that it's a massive problem.
Yeah. No, you had great vision to see that there was a product there. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. So tell our audience a little bit about the solution and the problem that it solves for your customers today, and how it does that.
So I think that's a good segue. Well, kind of let me introduce on what specifically that we are trying to solve. In most of these enterprise conversations, we realize there are three large problems. The first problem is that customers are looking for, they have multi-cloud deployments. Either they are migrating to the public cloud, they might have some on-prem data centers, or they are in hosted data centers, if you will. But now they are wholeheartedly adopting Azure and AWS, right? In such a scenario, the biggest security risk that they see is they have no visibility, around their security posture. They cannot enforce any kind of organizational standards, be it an internal standard, be it, let's say, a NIST or a PCI DSS standard. They really can't enforce it. And the third, and a bigger problem that they started seeing is how do they govern their cloud adoption? So Cloudneeti, came into being primarily to solve the misconfiguration issues, and the way that we dealt with it was to really, provide these three aspects: visibility, compliance reporting, and managing or governing the public cloud adoption. In this particular way, we are primarily looking at identifying and eliminating cloud risks. That's how the product came into being.
It's funny, Guru, and I've summarized that on a show, probably while drinking, where I said misconfiguration leads to compromise, and that phrase just kind of stuck around for a while. But I mean, that's really the heart and soul of the problem that you're addressing.
Enterprises had a way to do this on their end devices when those devices were in the data center.
Yeah.
Right? They would have a configuration management solution. They would go out and validate against CIS or a STIG or something like that.
Because it was an operating system and some applications, and we worked at Tenable, right, where we did a lot of that.
Had tools. I built the one at Qualys, policy compliance.
Yeah.
And so there was a known way to look at the configuration, compare it to known benchmarks or baselines. But as soon as you moved to the cloud and you didn't control that environment much anymore, it created this gap of, well, how do I now do configuration management, not only of the infrastructure in the cloud, but the cloud account itself, which was a big gap in the market, which is obviously what your customers, Guru, were struggling with. And it needed a new solution, because the old solutions that were very endpoint focused weren't going to necessarily deal with the configuration of the cloud account itself and how it was configured, let alone necessarily some aspects of the infrastructure.
Now, Guru, borrowing on somewhat Haroon said, and I think it's really insightful of Haroon to say, a lot of security practitioners will say, well, if I've got an AWS instance and I'm deploying infrastructure or applications to it, I'm an expert. I've been around. I can learn this stuff, and I can control my own configuration. right? But I think that quickly falls down into needing some tools to help you do that, right?
Oh yeah. So I think what Matt was also kind of mentioning that the the real origins of these kind of a product line, if you will, and Gartner started calling it as cloud security posture assessment or CSPM in general, posture management. It starts off with customers have no idea on how to configure their cloud accounts, and traditional tools. As I think Matt and Paul, you are very aware of it, that all of them are endpoint or virtual machine or host based or sometimes even network based, right? Most of these security auditing tools, compliance tools, or be for that matter even perimeter management tools, came into being primarily on network and host. But cloud, created a mass of differentiated workloads, if you will, which are more cloud native. How would you put an agent on top of a PaaS service? Let's say you have an Azure or an AWS PaaS service, just a website or an API, services, if you will. There is no virtual machine. You can't deploy your agents there. How to manage serverless containers? Serverless, it could be Azure functions or AWS Lambda or Google functions. Most of the time, the deployments are open to the internet, right? There is no network boundary at all. So you can't control through perimeter or network. You can't control through agent-based or host-based. So there's no agents, there's no virtual network. The only available controls now would be more app security, more identity-based security, and kind of TLS and SSL, and even the token-based security.
Also, in that serverless environment, there's really no file for me to audit, right? Like when we were doing configuration auditing on at Tenable, if there was an application, we weren't so much tied to that application, but that application had some kind of configuration file, and I could go audit that configuration file. In serverless, like there's no real files anymore, right?
Well, serverless has still an endpoint, right? You still call an endpoint, and it will still have data in transit kind of encryption. You still have enablement of maybe SSL, TLS, custom domains. It will still have CORS, kind of the application level cross-origin aspects. It will have aspects around whether your specific entry points are SQL injection protected. Are they so there are various configurations in the public cloud that are auto-enabled for you, meaning they allow it for you, but you have to still configure it.
I got you.
These serverless functions, if you will, also contain some frameworks. You could have a .NET or a Java or a Python framework, and many times these are let's say you would take in a Python 3.6 kind of a framework that you attach to your AWS Lambda or an Azure function. Over a period of time, it will have vulnerabilities, right? So you will have to go and test against these vulnerabilities. So there are a whole slew of things that you can even do on top of serverless. And thankfully, the cloud providers like Azure, AWS, and Google, they will provide these set of best practices. But it is extremely difficult for you to kind of look into a large checklist and see. In fact, AWS has published somewhere closer to 40 plus best practices for AWS Lambda, right? Azure has published closer to 67 best practices. Google has recently published about 30 plus, serverless best practices, and they're continually adding. How would you kind of manage all of these checklists and make sure that these are protected and these configurations are managed? And that's the problem that we are trying to solve. And you add on top of it, you have virtual machines, you have containers, you have SaaS apps, like you have Office 365, Dropbox, various maybe CASB kind of products, but getting tied into the newer space. You have newer workloads like machine learning. You would have, database as a service, which has various open endpoints. So now the problem gets bigger and bigger because the workloads are very, very diverse. I think that's the root.
You're scaring me, Guru, because I have some of those things, and I'm like, I'm not really auditing them today.
Right, like our RDS database and all the AWS account configuration.
EC2. I know what you're doing tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Well, Paul, you can run our product, on your installation, and you'll seriously notice that there are so many RDS configurations on AWS, so many storage accounts.
And so I want to tell a quick story about how that happened. So we were moving infrastructure into the cloud, like you described so many organizations doing, right? And I think this happens fairly often, where like I come into work, I'm founder of the company and doing the architecture design for it, and I come to work one day and I'm like, where's the database container? And the developers are like, oh, we're just using RDS now and it's all working. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool, I think, right? But that's how it happens, right? And the other, kind of dovetail of that was, I was telling a story earlier, I was reading some documentation about how to deploy Python apps and using your example, Guru, and I'm like, oh, it's like a whole tutorial on how to push them up into Google Cloud. I'm like, that's really cool, and it looks really easy.
And that's how you get ants.
And that's how you get ants. Yes, that is exactly how you get ants.
Google App Engine, same sort of thing. When Ben Jackson and I were doing the whole stuff with the metadata stuff, the website that does all the back-end data analysis that was doing all of the analysis of all the images on Twitter got pushed to Google App Engine. It's still there, and I have no idea how it works. Oh, well.
Yeah. Well, I think, and not to scare you guys, but in general, I think this is a kind of a real experience that we had with two enterprises, although they might not publicly, go live with something like this, right? So these enterprises, they bought AWS accounts and Azure subscriptions, right? From a dev standpoint, they had nothing deployed on it, no virtual machines, no workloads of any kind, right? But they were still active, and they had a budget, an unlimited budget on these, and we were in the process of starting to use them to start building them, and it so happened that they were their identity and access management systems were hijacked. They were their accounts or credentials were pawned. And when we started actually using it, we found that there are a couple of virtual machines, really big virtual machines, about 128 CPUs, massive massive storages, really large compute clusters. And then we inquired, like, who's really running it? Actually, nobody was, within the enterprise, had ownership of it, which essentially meant that they were cryptojacked. Right. Their accounts were hijacked, and and nobody knew about it.
And they were running Bitcoin harvesting.
Yeah, and you don't realize
out of your environment to
get a $100,000 bill for your compute for the month.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Nice. So, and I think that's the first time we saw that that traditional tools would not work. Traditional tools will only look at network and host. This is a new game, right? Where account hijacking becomes the first ball that the hijackers can roll in and see whether it operates. If it operates, they don't care about your workloads. They can stand up something new and try something like Bitcoin harvesting, and we've experienced it ourselves. Some of our enterprise customers experience it ourselves. This is crazy.
Didn't we have that issue?
Well, we did. Yeah, someone deployed a new container because we left an API open. Thankfully, it was a denial of service attack, and we got traffic. We had configured some monitoring around the compute side, so billing we would get notifications, and bandwidth we would get notifications, so we were notified that happened, right? But before there was all these cloud services, if an attacker got into your system and was using the compute, it really wasn't a big deal. Like, if they stole some data, that might be a big deal. But if they were just using it for compute, it was like, I'm not getting a $100,000 bill. Like, I go back to the story where at the university we had this big supercomputer, right? And someone broke in and was using the compute cycles on it, and no one really noticed until the attacker started applying patches so that other attackers wouldn't get in. And then they were like, wait, why are all these patches being applied? But I mean, they cleaned it up.
Why is this shit not broken anymore?
Yeah, exactly. Right? And they cleaned it up and kicked the attackers out, and it's not a big deal, except now in the cloud you get a big bill.
You're gonna get a bill for not only the compute, but the big ones, the bandwidth. That's the one that's gonna nail you too.
Yeah, the bandwidth, the compute.
I've got another scenario I'm trying to get my hands on.
Huge databases. We've seen some really crazy things as well.
Go ahead, Lee.
So one of the scenarios we've been talking about is beyond. We talk about protecting it at rest in the cloud and en route to the cloud. is they're talking about protecting data while being processed, and
Mm-hmm.
who on the cloud service can scrape data out of memory. And
Mm-hmm.
that's been really perplexing. And I'm wondering, have you run into that use case yet?
So I think probably Matt, keeps talking about host or app and user, kind of these three tiers, if you will. And we have seen, that in transit or in memory, really being attacked at the app level, right, or within app. And I think tools like Qualys is trying to go, look at that. But we have seen that in the pure cloud world, Azure and AWS, they are investing very heavily into in-app protection, app whitelisting, kind of scenarios. So the risks, are getting reduced, but unfortunately, these are not enabled by default, and that's again a configuration that the customers will have to deploy. But we have seen threats being coming out from Azure and AWS. You have, you call in a guard duty, you call in, Azure Security Center API, and you will find a thread that something was run, a specific server, had a specific, app or a process for whom the memory boundaries were violated, and nobody can tell why they were violated, right? And then you start digging into it, then you'll see that hey, there's a small pattern that's coming in. Some process somewhere, had a remote access available, and that comes in only once in like X number of days, and tries, kind of a recon mission to go find out what's vulnerable and attempts to do that, and then it goes silent. So it is a trend that is happening.
Because I run into some conversations, and the quick answer seems to be, well, if you're worried about it being accessed, just encrypt it all en route to and from the cloud so that you're not putting unencrypted data in the cloud. But that makes it kind of hard to process on the remote end.
It's across the board, right? On the a lot of new SaaS apps that enterprises are consuming, right? They are delivered over the browser, and the browsers, right, sometimes don't have CORS enabled, a CORS enabled, right? Or for that matter, their JavaScript tooling itself, can be hacked. Sometimes man in the middle. I think the previous gentleman before this call talking about honeypots. So some of these things are getting more and more, if you will, visible, because of the SaaS delivery models, because of even the SaaS or the ISVs who are building these things. They don't go through their own penetration testing, but enterprises will now consume them because these are small microservices. They won't think they might be vulnerable. A simple example being, we were using SendGrid, we were using Twilio. These are SaaS-enabled services that developers will think that, hey, I want to send a pager, I want to send a notification, let me go use that. And unfortunately, these are not always enabled through SSL, right? Sometimes even TLS 1.0 or older versions of SSL are being, deployed for that. So which means that man-in-the-middle attacks, pretty much are certain. You can put a network monitor, within the enterprise and being able to kind of sniff out, look at some of these SSLs and being able to go against it. So yes, these are a lot of these SaaS apps, coming into the enterprises being deployed, and that makes it, very difficult to manage that as well. I hope I didn't stray much beyond your question there.
No, you did great. It's not trivial.
Guru, I wanted to go back to, even in smaller organizations, let alone large enterprises, you have people deploying new technology, and you may not know about it. Does Cloudneeti help with that, or do you have to do a discovery process and then apply compliance so that they are deploying that securely?
So we have three use cases that, or rather three kind of buyer personas that come and knock on our doors. The first one is someone who's migrating to the public cloud for the first time, right? And they were referred to us either through the cloud provider like Azure or AWS, right? Or some of our partners, some of the managed services partners would bring us to the table. And we find them that, they would not understand cloud security best practices at all, right? So some of these things, we have to go and educate them that cloud is different, just like we are talking about it now. We have to go sit down with them. Most times they would have either infrastructure engineers, someone who has a background around networking or app developers, right? They won't have, especially small ISVs or mid-size or SMB kind of companies, they won't have an InfoSec team or a GRC team. They would bring us in for educational purposes, and they will use our product, to do a quick assessment of where they stand. Because our product is agentless, deployed as a SaaS service, right? The onboarding time it takes is about less than 5 to 10 minutes for them to, bring in their AWS, Office 365, or Azure subscriptions to the table. They would be able to go quickly assess where they stand.
And so, so in that case, right, I mean, you would have certain kind of benchmarks to evaluate against those
Correct.
different cloud accounts and
Correct.
be able to come back and analyze, okay, this is best practice for O365 or for your Azure configuration.
Mm-hmm.
Give them a quick checklist to say, okay, here's where you have gaps in your configurations. These are things you might want to look at and turn on or reconfigure to enforce a better compliance posture.
You mean it would have told me, hey, dummy, don't leave your Docker API open to the internet?
Would it have done that, Guru, for him?
Yeah. So trust me, I think what Paul mentioned, that happens all the time. Docker API has been exposed to the internet all the time. We have Kubernetes clusters that are open to the internet, all the time, right? We would have virtual machines with RDP access enabled all the time, right? There's nobody who will go ahead and put, a JIT or just-in-time access at all. We would have storage accounts, be it S3 buckets or Azure storage accounts open to the internet all the time, right? So these are things
I
that
only feel a little better, Guru.
He only made one of those mistakes, not all of
one.
those. And we fixed
It only
fast.
takes one, though.
Except for I don't think you've checked your RDS configuration to make sure it's not open to the internet.
No, I have not.
Guess what he's doing tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen.
Tonight when I get home.
Yeah. But to tie into what Matt was mentioning, right? So these customers will ask us, hey, we either want to be secure. So some of these customers start off with a security angle that, hey, I want to make sure that I am following all the CIS best practices, or in general all the security best practices, across the board, right? Regardless of which benchmark I choose. So in that case, we provide them with a cloud security best practices policy package, which tells them, within about 10 minutes or so, that your X percentage or your so many policies that are, that you fail or pass, right? The second set of customers that will ask us is, I want to go ahead and achieve, let's say, PCI DSS compliance or HIPAA compliance or NIST or FFIEC compliance. So we support about 11 plus compliance frameworks. So they would start tinkering around, they would have usually about 10 to 20 odd, cloud subscriptions. Could be a combination of Azure, AWS, and M365 or Office 365. And they want to get an aggregated view that, hey, I want to be sure that once I get in front of the auditor, I'm able to go produce the evidence to them. So they would start almost 3 to 6 months earlier and start working with us on continuous compliance. So the first day they will say that, hey, I am about X percentage compliance, and they would work with us on what are the top things that I should go solve so that I reduce the risk, initially from a security standpoint, and over a period of time, I get better and better from a compliance standpoint. So that's the second kind of customer that comes and works with us, and we are releasing a risk posture very soon to them, trying to tell them that these are the things that you should do within the first 15 days or 30 days time frame. At least close off all of your, internet-enabled or internet-facing, services. These are the things that you should do. So we'll kind of give them a quick wins checklist, and then follow up with a 60-day or a 90-day kind of a guidance. But that's the second kind of customer. The third kind of customer that we kind of get is usually the GRC or the risk auditors. And it's very funny that you'd think that the risk auditors or compliance auditors will understand how to audit. Most of the times they're really good at people, processes, trainings, whether your endpoint devices are good or not, but they are completely, I would say even illiterate, if you will, if you want to go till that state about cloud security and cloud compliance. So they would use our product, to even understand how to look at compliance. We have some PCI DSS QSAs who are, auditing, as third party to their customers. they would deploy our product, get the audit reports, and then work with the customer on advising on various risks. That's the third kind of customers that we find who use our product from an auditing standpoint.
Yeah, I think the point there is that the IT auditors know the traditional IT audit skills, which is network, endpoint, etc., but may not have had to deal with auditing in the cloud. And what do they really need to look for there to perform an audit to verify a level of compliance in this new world?
Exactly, yeah. I think, I got distracted. Paul was handing out the wine bottle, and I was just about to go and grab it.
You have to make a visit here to the studio.
I know.
Guru.
I can't get this to you fast enough. You're in Seattle, baby. So.
Yeah. Sorry, I missed a train of thought there. But yeah, the internal auditors, also don't sometimes understand, how to audit workloads which are not network or host based. So we have one of the ISVs who's purely serverless, right? Including the front end is serverless. They have nothing deployed, from a host standpoint or even a networking standpoint, right? They only have like AWS Lambda functions and an RDS, an RDS database, behind the scenes. But even that they are converting into a consumption plan, right? AWS has announced a few of them. Even that's becoming serverless. So that makes the internal auditor very queasy about how do I audit something that he doesn't understand.
Yeah, no, I can see that.
I want to go to the pen testers in the room and those in the audience. I'd like to hear from you as well. We've talked about basically cloud security for the majority of this segment. Is that coming up on your radar? Is that in scope? Are you making it in scope? Are you finding vulnerabilities in cloud architecture, or is it still really like kind of going back to Haroon's example of finding some AWS keys and getting access to the infrastructure? Guru also gave an example of that as well. How is this included in scope on your pen test, and if so, in what capacity?
Well, I can weigh in really quick.
Go ahead, John.
Paul. I would say yes, but what I'm typically seeing is cloud deployed web applications becoming in scope quite frequently, and also the other example that you just put out there, and that is in the context of some pen test, be it an internal, external, maybe even web app, or some sort of source code review, you find a token disclosure in there that you then leverage to gain much wider access to data that you probably shouldn't have access to, right? So I think a little bit of both. We are seeing some cloud architecture, security review kind of work come around as well here and there.
Joff, so are you seeing some of these open accounts, like open database access, open Docker API? Are you guys actually testing for some of those open to the public capabilities that should be closed down? Do you see those in your pen test? I'm just curious how much of that you actually see.
Well, that's hard to comment on because I haven't been as involved with those tests as some of the other folks in the company lately. I've been more focused on internal network pen tests and some malware development work. So I can't give you a recent example there, but I'm going to guess yes. Maybe Larry has some input on that.
I'm unfortunately about the same sort of stance as you are.
You guys have a different focus,
different focus. But I'd like to say, I think we probably have, based on some of the the rumblings that I hear about. Oh my God, I can't believe they did that going on.
Yeah, I will tell you that I have encountered on a number of tests in the past situations where somebody left a source repository sitting on a production server somewhere that I discovered, managed to pilfer storage tokens from it, managed to write Python scripts using the Boto library to actually access storage and investigate that and use it to my advantage. So these kinds of things definitely are happening, and I think it's a problem from the perspective of, I think, kind of exec level. people, and it may not just be at exec level, so don't take me wrong, execs out there, but I think people do have the impression somewhere along the line that once I go cloud, maybe my security problems are over. And I think that's an impression that we need to talk about a little bit more, because that's certainly not the case. We all know that. We need to communicate that message that your security problems and responsibilities don't get checked at the door once you sign up to a cloud provider.
Yeah, I mean, this is the old adage when you outsourced, right? You could outsource the risk or outsource the function, but you couldn't outsource the risk. Same kind of exists, I think, in the cloud environment. You might be outsourcing your infrastructure to the cloud, but the configuration of that account is still your responsibility as an organization. Yes, the cloud providers have added additional security features, but they may not be turned on by default. And how do you know that those configurations are correct, such that you can configure the environment correctly, secure it a little more, and then leverage some of those tools to help add additional layers of protection from your cloud provider? But again, you've got to know that they're enabled or not.
Yeah, Guru, one of the reoccurring themes that I keep hearing and seeing in the news is abuse of the authentication and authorization piece. And I think this kind of is a parallel to when I read about DNS hijacking. I'm like, oh, it's some super cool like network attack and they're hijacking the DNS. And then I read the article. I'm like, oh, like they password sprayed to get into whoever was hosting, the registrar, and they just changed their DNS servers. I feel like a lot of the same things are happening in cloud environments, that the like most basic level is to protect your cloud assets. You got to have proper authentication and authorization and some processes and technology around notifying you if that happens. For example, are there a lot of cloud configuration type audits that can help organizations improve their authentication schemes?
Maybe at slightly at a broader level, right? So there are 4 or 5 different kinds of issues that even from like a pen tester or an auditor need to be educated about. The first one is in the cloud world, identity and access is becoming one of the primary perimeter, if you will, right? The primary protection layer, if you will, and understanding AWS IAM and Azure Active Directory based IAM, it's very, very different than understanding your on-prem Active Directory, right? So
I would argue, Guru, it's hard right now to figure out how that stuff works, let alone how to secure it. I mean, having written some scripts this week that interface with various APIs, just figuring out how you're supposed to authenticate to make it work is a challenge today.
It is a challenge. Authentication is a challenge. Granting role-based access, permissions, which is kind of dual layer, right? So one for your DevOps teams, right, who has access to your operational data, and other from an app standpoint to your users, right? Most of the times, your focus is around, external, authorizations, or even for that matter, app-based, or role-based security. But most of the attacks that happen on your infrastructure happen to be more from the DevOps, or the controls there are not met, the RBACs are not met. That's one thing that needs to be protected. The second, and we have seen this almost in closer to 15 odd customers just in the last 3 months, right? That nobody knows how to monitor, right? Even if there is a preventative control, right? You might be able to audit those preventative controls once in a quarter or so. There's no detection controls. There's no monitoring controls, right? That, hey, someone accessed my RDP, my virtual machine. Someone, made a request to, let's say, the Docker API, or someone made a request to my, to my virtual machines, my containers, my SaaS services, PaaS services, and so on.
And that's a great point. Like, how do I know that someone is abusing some kind of OAuth token that's stepping outside? Like, I know my application does a very specific thing and uses OAuth to authenticate. It's pretty easy, if you have the monitoring capabilities, to know that something else stepped outside the bounds of what normally happens. Monitoring that is really hard.
And AWS and Azure particularly, and very recently Google announced various set of monitoring associated to pretty much all of their services. Unfortunately, none of these are enabled by default. Right? and every single service, and AWS has about 160 plus services. Azure has about 150 plus services. For each one of them, there is a slight variation on how do you enable monitoring, right? Some you enable monitoring by going, attaching that to your storage account. Some you enable it through CloudTrail. Some you enable it by going directly to your local SIM, and Azure has their own SIM now, which is called Azure Sentinel. Some will go and put that into a log analytics or some kind of storage bucket, if you will. So each of these services are to be configured differently, and customers really need to understand how to enable them by default, right? That's the second boundary, if you will, on from a detection standpoint, whether whether somebody has accessed it and can you actually monitor it. Most times what we have seen is enterprises will say, hey, I have Splunk, right? I don't need to think about it, but they don't configure all of the data coming in from all of these services that they have on Azure and AWS connected to Splunk, right? And they will assume that somebody else is monitoring Splunk, so I don't need to care, right? And the app devs will, happy to open up a PaaS endpoint, a serverless endpoint. They're not connected to Splunk at all. So we have seen, and I think this is a test that even a pen tester should be able to go and do this, right? Stand up a virtual machine on Azure or AWS, right? And even before it boots up, right, within about 2 minutes or 3 minutes or so, if you attach your monitoring to CloudWatch, CloudTrail, or to Azure Monitor, you will see password, or brute force attacks, password hash attacks, even before the virtual machine has been booted, right? Naturally, it is always open to the internet, right? By default, it is always open to the internet when you stand up a virtual machine, unless you automate it, right? So that you should put it into a network. And that's, that's scary. And we saw that. We stood up, an Azure virtual machine, and, side by side AWS virtual machine. And we actually, counted the time it takes for we seeing the first password hash attacks or brute force attacks. In the case of Azure, it was closer to 1.3 minutes, right? About 100 odd, seconds or so, right? In case of AWS, it was much less than that. It was less than a minute, right? And that's scary, because now if you don't know that you're getting attacked, or you're getting either abused for that matter, or you're breached, right? It is very difficult. So the concept of assume breach, that most enterprises talk about, it's a good concept, but they should put in these detective controls or monitoring controls to even have that visibility. And that's what we also, advise as part of the, as part of an automated monitoring. So these, IAM-based controls, TLS-based encryptions from a data transit standpoint, logging monitoring controls, and all the way down to, whether your storage databases are encrypted, that are they protected from an RBAC standpoint? Do they have, less than about, maybe 2% or 3% of your entire user base who has access to your cloud account? They are, privileged admins or not. Same is the case. We in fact, we have seen some recent attacks with key vaults, be it AWS, KMS services or Azure key vaults. They're open to the internet by default. They're open to the internet, right? So most times nobody notices them.
Because they're not monitoring them, like you said.
Yeah. They're not. Nobody's noticing them that their key vaults are getting accessed. All they've noticed it is that, hey, my billing, for key vault has suddenly started increasing, but they won't notice that somebody's actually accessing it, on an infrequent basis. So monitoring is a huge deal. At least, not focus only on the asset-based monitoring, which is like your virtual machines or containers, but pretty much all of your services. Because if you get hacked into key vault, you pretty much get hacked across the board.
It's scary. I feel like it's taken us 20 years to be having conversations about how we secure Active Directory, and we've made headway when it's locally on premises, and still there's organizations that are catching up there. But it could take the next 10 or 20 years for us to have that same level of maturity as we apply it to the cloud.
Yeah. Hey, Paul, I just remembered, on that topic, when you're talking about Active Directory specifically, we have seen instances where organizations have inadvertently exposed their Active Directory fairly openly through the fact that they have, a cloud mirror of what's on-prem. And most of it is just what Guri said. It's misconfiguration or not understanding the correct best practices they need to apply when they actually deploy.
It's one of my fears about DevOps, right? It's that combination of development and operations, which are traditionally more separate. And we've made arguments that it can be more secure, and I get that. However, if you look at a traditional on-premises deployment, you've got development and operations and security, and they're operating independently, right? So there's someone on a physical firewall going, no internet traffic, right? When you go to the cloud and those things are together, and you've got developers potentially making decisions, a lot of times making decisions.
And spinning up infrastructure. There's no separate person going, no, I'm managing the firewall, for our cloud instance. The firewall is just all in software, and it's part of the development process.
Because the developers are, and they're going, my client can't get access to the server, so
open everything.
IP any.
Yep.
Yeah. So the speed and agility.
Can
actually
I add something to
introduces
Paul
a
there?
cost.
Sorry, go ahead, Guru. Yeah.
And I think it aggravates a little more, right? So you can now stand up your firewall instances per app, right? There's no centralized firewall.
Right.
It's not software defined. So we've seen that one enterprise customer has closer to 40 odd apps. Each of them has their own instance of a firewall. Has their own instance of a DDoS protection. Some of them have it, some of them don't have it. So there's no standardization, but it gets aggravated because there's no centralized firewall anymore. And you can define a firewall with its own IP, right? For each of the individual apps, and there's no centralized control over it. And that makes it much more difficult.
It used to be when Joff and I were at the university, we managed the firewall. We said on all of our border firewalls, never, ever, ever accept an RDP connection from the internet. And administrators, right, Joff, would come knocking on our door. Like, I really need this. And we're like, no, you need to use the VPN. Like, no, you're not doing that. But now today, that's out the window. That level of control has gone out the window.
Yeah. You're right. And which is why I think companies like Palo Alto and Checkpoint, are still in the game that, hey, now you need to still ensure that kind of a firewall protection. But I think the enterprises are, need to understand that, of course, the cloud-based security services, be it firewall, DDoS protections, they come at a much cheaper price point, right? So the feature to cost, ratio, cost to feature ratio is extremely, favored for the customers. Less than 5% or 10% of, a firewall cost that you would pay to a Palo Alto or Checkpoint vendor, you'd buy it from Azure or AWS. But the problem,
but now the challenge is, how do you centrally manage all those distributed environments? And that's where I think some of the firewall management companies have an opportunity to really hybridize across both on-prem deployments and cloud deployments to really look at the configuration of all these distributed firewalls now. Similar to the conversation we had with OpenVPN yesterday, this concept of a distributed mesh.
It's a mesh.
It's a mesh, right? But how do you centrally manage a highly distributed mesh? And those guys that figure out how to do that actually help us and win the broader firewall management game.
Yep.
Well, there's an upside, I think, too. The fact that the software stack is starting to merge, it brings with it, software-defined security controls that are on the cloud, as we know. But it also brings with it the ability to perform microsegmentation. So if you end up with a more centralized strategy where you can orchestrate that, for lack of a better word, in a centralized policy sense, then you potentially have much better chance of enforcing properly than you do with the older model, which was sort of that single brick roadblock kind of model, and everything had to fit into certain layer 3 boundaries to make it work. Now we have the idea that the stack is more vertically integrated, and a lot of those boundaries are driven by the applications. They're driven by the user structure and the directory, and so there's huge opportunities now with the software-defined nature of a decentralized perimeter. It's a matter of people actually seizing upon it and bringing that policy centralization back into the whole framework.
Yeah, and it's that centralization of the
But to-
policies and management
Yeah.
that's going to be critical.
Yeah, decentralization is necessary, but I think to adding to the point, yes, the verticalization of these stacks are happening, but the problem gets aggravated, because now it is also distributed across multiple cloud accounts,
Yeah.
right? So you'll have app
Yep.
1 onto a cloud account 1 and app 2 on a cloud account 2, right? If you start thinking that, hey, I have production accounts which are relegated to only cloud account 1 to 40, right? How do you centrally manage a centralized policy, let's say for your firewall or for your RDP access at a single console? There's nothing like that because you have it distributed across multiple cloud accounts. So central policy management, either cloud providers themselves will do it, or let's say Palo Alto or Checkpoint or someone like that brings in maybe not necessarily an appliance, but an
Or some
inbuilt PaaS
combination.
service, which provides that centralized console view, right? That will be amazing. But there's none like that today.
Well, I think it also it brings in the question and actually raises the visibility again of what we used to call an enterprise architect, somebody that actually has that sort of global perspective of their organization's assets and can exert some design over the top of what's being deployed. That's going to become an even more valuable role when you've got such massive decentralization of the perimeters and such exponential virtualization of the application layer, which is happening right now.
Yeah, that's a great point, Josh, to think about how that role has evolved over time, right?
Or how it needs to
and it
evolve.
needs to evolve, right? Because back in the day,
it needs to reemerge in a way.
It
I
does,
think.
Josh. You're right. Because back in the day, that was typically a really talented Cisco engineer that was looking at the problem holistically, and there was a lot of physical infrastructure being deployed, and they were architecting how all that stuff tied together.
All those routes happened.
They were managing the routes, but now that's
right.
that's that's an archaic model today. Now it's all software defined and it's up in the cloud.
I think.
And then
I think
on
that,
top of
that model needs to emerge again, redefined as a new role. And I'm sure forward-thinking organizations are already doing this. I would hope so. And I don't know about you, Paul, but I held that title at one point in my career. You probably did too. And that was a pretty important role back in the day, and it probably should reemerge.
Agreed. Lee?
I was thinking on top of that, the way the cloud is set up, it almost facilitates shadow IT. So to keep an enterprise arm around what's really going on becomes exponentially difficult. And I had a question for Guru, and that was, it seemed like with the complexity of the cloud and when you start discovering what's out there in an enterprise, how much time do you have to spend educating the client about what they have going on because they simply don't understand the intricacies, complexity, or volume?
That's a challenge to us. I think that's a great question. Let me split this into two parts of it. The first part is who do we educate, right? Within the enterprise, there are usually three divisions, that come in and knock on our doors even from an education or training standpoint. The first one is the guys who are provisioning the infrastructure. Traditionally, these days, they've been referred as DevOps, right? The second set of organizations which don't work with them today are the InfoSec team, right? They happen to report into some other organization, could be a CISO, or someone, right? Traditionally, they come in from, I know how do I manage the policies for data center. I know I have some knowledge about cloud, but I have no idea about the various best practices that I can deploy for cloud. Then there's a third, kind of, set of people who are separate from these, which are kind of the internal auditors or even the SOC team, right? Most of the SOC team today, or even the internal auditors, if you bundle them into one organization, we see that, they understand, prevention well, they understand detection well, only for the ones that they know about, which is virtual machines, maybe some containers.
Endpoints.
And maybe very recently some PaaS as well for some of the more innovative enterprises, but they don't have a holistic tool around how do I detect, how do I prevent, how do I identify these threats and try to put caps around it. So we end up initially, and as we started the product, we used to work mostly on the DevOps and InfoSec space, and an area in between to educate both of them as they migrate to the public cloud. But now, as we are becoming more and more of a product company, we've started working and partnering with MSPs, very large MSPs, the top 7 or 8 in the Gartner quadrant, right? We've started working with each one of them, and instead of we educating the enterprises, right, we understand that these enterprises are employing these MSPs. We will rather take the time to educate, and teach how these MSPs to fish, right? We provide, as a product, we provide the visibility, we provide the set of best practices, and we have a total of about 1,200 or 1,200 best practices, combined for only security and compliance best practices for Azure, AWS, and Office 365. And by the end of the year, we'll be somewhere in the ballpark of between 3,000 to 4,000 odd, best practices over there. So it takes time for us to educate enterprise. So we'll educate MSPs and educate auditors and SOC team on how to integrate. And we also integrate directly into, let's say, ticketing systems. And within the ticketing systems, when we say that there's a deviation, we will put in detailed set of remediation or recommendations that, hey, you can run this script, and we will provide some scripts for them to run, for either guided remediation or auto remediation, or we will tell them that you go into, let's say, Azure console or AWS console and do click, 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 and you are able to go prevent this particular configuration. But we also put a caveat that, the moment you do that, the next release will come in, and that will wipe off all the configurations. So you have to take all of these configurations that we are advising into your DevOps pipeline, do a left shift around it. So it takes time for us to go educate, all of these, because it's very complex. And these 3 organizations, typically, they don't work with each other at all, right? App dev team or DevOps team, InfoSec team, and traditional GRC or risk management team. And fortunately, and that's the space that we are operating, our product becomes an education tool, a continuous monitoring tool, and a continuous assurance tool by bringing in all of these collaborators on the same data, which is live data, right? And being able to showcase that dashboard to them and click remediate, click auto remediate, or click get a report around it. And that's where we are building the product to. And thankfully, fortunately, Gartner's also recommending our product to their enterprise customers, their MSPs. So hopefully we will see that we might become one of the largest, and we would love it.
We would love that too, Guru. It was so nice having you on the show. I love the conversation. It was absolutely fantastic. To round out this segment, we just want to play 5 questions with Security Weekly. So are you ready?
You have 5 questions. Love it.
We have 5 questions. So, Guru, 3 words to describe yourself.
Curious, maybe intuitive, and very optimistic about the future.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
Keyboard. I'm an engineer.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
I would say it's probably Trials and Tribunals of an Engineer turned a Businessman.
In the popular game of Ask Grabby Grabby, do you prefer to go first or second?
Grabby Grabby. Ask Grabby Grabby. How interesting. Not sure. Second, maybe.
Choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
Alive, dead, fictional, or otherwise?
Otherwise.
Einstein and Robert De Niro.
Oh.
Very weird choices, yeah.
Ooh, I like that.
Fantastic. Guru, thank you so much for appearing on Security Weekly. Cloudneeti.com/Security Weekly for our listeners that want to learn more. And with that, we'll take a short break. Come back with the security news this week. Lots to talk about. Stay tuned.
Thinkst Canary makes high-fidelity honeypots that set up in minutes and requires no ongoing administration. Attackers moving silently on your network advertise their presence by tripping over them. There's a good reason Thinkst Canaries are deployed and loved by some of the best security teams in the world. They're inexpensive, they're simple, and they work. For more information, go to securityweekly.com/canary or direct message @ThinkstCanary on Twitter. In 2018, ransomware advanced significantly and is now capable of taking out infrastructure and operations across the globe. As a result, many organizations are bogged down in reactive work and often overlook the value of crucial information. In Domain Tools Threat Intelligence Report, learn how to uncover some of the most critical insights from your organization's alerts and indicators that will allow you to shift to a more proactive posture. To download this white paper, please visit securityweekly.com/domain tools. Is your IT team ready to face the next implementation or upgrade? Do you have a pool of talented team members who are trained and ready to support your organization's growth? The right IT skills development platform can get you past the IT skills gap. With training content that's so engaging, some even call it binge-worthy learning, your team will watch and learn more with IT Pro TV. Get a free team trial of IT Pro TV today. Visit securityweekly.com/IT Pro TV.
Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. Some of you have told us that you're overwhelmed by the amount of content we distribute. In an attempt to address that, we've got a mailing list that you can subscribe to, and that will turn into basically a notification system so that if you tell us you're interested in a list of things, when we publish something that is one of those things, we'll send you a notification. Go to securityweekly.com/subscribe. Click the Join the Listener Interest mailing list button, and you'll be on your way. Also on that page, you can subscribe to all of our shows. Believe it or not, there's 7 on the network.
It's amazing.
Today. Secure Digital Life seems to be the one that needs a little bit of love. If you know people that are just getting into the field, that is the show to send to them. Doug and Russ do a fantastic job covering the basics of security on that show, and it's wildly entertaining.
Especially with the doctor.
The Dr. Doug is a wildly entertaining individual.
Yes, he makes it very. This last week's was all about how to buy heroin on the darknet.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
It really was.
And clearly he might have had some before the show. Ask him how he knows this. I mean,
why is it?
I think he did attempt it. I'm pretty sure.
I'm sure he did.
He's trying to figure it out.
Why is it that it's 2019 and we're still talking about Telnet? Like, seriously? And
I
this
thought you were
one,
about to say SQL injection.
well, I don't have any stories about that, Joff, but I can say that when we're talking about Telnet, this is in light of Fujifilm X-ray devices. The snippet that I took out is it's even worse than just Telnet. Like, never mind unencrypted access to systems where your credentials and all your data are in clear text, obviously. But this flaw was related to the lack of authentication for Telnet services, CVE 2019-10950. It says the second bug can be exploited to access the underlying operating system and possibly gain complete control of a vulnerable device.
Wow.
You know, the sad part is, Paul, you say that we're still talking about Telnet, and when I teach the wireless course for SANS, there's some opportunities when I say, so when we connect to our switch and we look at these configuration elements, I used to say when we Telnet to our switches and we get Snickers. And now I say, when we SSH to our switch, I still get Snickers, but in the reverse, because people are still telnetting to them. Like,
Yes.
Can't fucking win.
In the case with switches, the ironic thing is that sometimes it's somewhere in between, Larry. It's SSH, but it's like a really, really weak cipher.
Yes.
And where some of my switches I have to dumb down and like make a configuration file to like really scale back the level of encryption that SSH can do to get into them. Older switches were like SSH v1 that had known vulnerabilities.
Even better. Did you know you can do encrypted telnet?
Interesting. On switches?
Well, I don't know about on switches, but encrypted telnet is a thing.
It is a thing. I remember that.
Yep,
yeah.
It is a thing.
Yeah, it was a. Hey, does anybody remember? This kind of takes me back to nostalgic days. Does anybody remember the very first time they actually ran a sniffer we're talking probably 90s somewhere, and they watched Telnet in motion, like,
Oh, yeah.
and it's like,
Oh yeah.
we all talk about it like it's like, oh yeah, stupid idea, blah blah blah. But that first time that you're like, holy shit, that's the password right there.
It's awesome.
Like, it's that a really awesome experience.
Mine was
you had a snort rule that would just automatically pick up on it and log the credentials. And then there was that one time where I was sniffing Telnet, and I'm like, it looks encrypted, but like not really encrypted. And I'm like Googling, and it was exactly, Joff. It was Epsidic. It was Epsidic. It was a mainframe.
Yeah, I had something similar, but it wasn't Epsidic, and it looked kind of weird, and it was TN3270 terminal session.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, takes you back. Takes you back.
Yeah, but you can still get that experience today, folks, because there it is.
Yes. Now, the example I have is a similar vulnerability is an HDMI router, right? And like, okay, I mean, even in any organization that has an HDMI router, you're only getting so far if you pwn an HDMI router. Like, it's basically like 8 in, 8 outs, and you can map it between them, right?
Yeah, but this is an X-ray device.
Yeah. Now, this example, that's exactly where I was going, Matt. It's an X-ray device. And last week or the week before, we covered a story where they could modify the images. I think it was last week. Modify the diagnostic images in the healthcare environment, and
you apply the two of these together, and you could.
We used to find those things all the time. That's probably still around today. When I was on the university world again, going way back, scanning electron microscopes had embedded Windows NT kernels in them that were never patched.
Well, well, it's not funny. I guess it's kind of sad. With the HDMI switcher I was talking about, there's no way to set a password on the Telnet server. Like, you can't.
Just can't do it.
Physically set a password.
What IP address is this in the studio?
I'll tell you after.
No, I'm kidding.
So, like, my solution for that was, well, just plug into the Ethernet of the HDMI switch, plug the other end into a Raspberry Pi, and then enable SSH on the Raspberry Pi, and that's my interface into the switch.
You SSH to the Raspberry Pi
and then Telnet into the
directly into it.
Yeah. That was my solution.
It's $1 million idea,
right? Or a $39 idea.
No, but you can mark it up 90% and sell the snot out of it.
That's right. It's an HDMI routing security appliance.
No. It's a hardwired IoT security appliance.
That's right. Yeah, because you could put that on your X-ray machine.
And this is why geeks suck at marketing.
Yeah. Normally, we're pretty good at marketing. We're just, this is our third bottle of wine.
Yeah. But don't worry, we could find a way to make money out of it.
Oh yeah,
I'm sure we could.
Totally.
There's a reason I'm not in marketing.
Facebook could be fined up to $5 billion over privacy violations. What I found interesting about this article is the article states, to be clear, the amount of the fine is not what the FTC has announced or hinted at. Instead, it's an estimated due that Facebook disclosed on Wednesday. I think that was yesterday. I think this article was recent, in the first quarter 2019 financial earnings report.
Yeah, and I think what they did is if I remember that article correctly, they've already put $3 billion aside
to pay the fines.
Just to pay the FTC fine. And this is on top of that, I think.
Interesting.
Yep.
Because they were putting money aside.
Even for Facebook, though, Matt.
$3 billion aside just for the FTC
that's
fine.
That's not chump change. To Facebook, that's not chump change.
No, it's not chump change. Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of money.
The article that I read on this suffered from poor editing, and it was at a well-respected, that the article said $5 billion, and then the subheading was 5 million, and in the article it said 3 billion. Like,
Jesus.
Which one is it?
Yeah, I know they set aside $3 billion to be prepared for what they believe will be their FTC fine. Oof. And if this story is $5 billion, not including that fine, we're now talking $8 billion in fines and potential damages that have to be paid out for privacy violations.
And we got two choices. Either we could pay off a tiny, tiny fraction of the national debt, or we could build a fucking wall. Just saying.
All right.
Wow. All right. You went there.
You're not dragging politics into this.
You went there.
Sorry, couldn't help it.
Can we build a wall around Facebook? Because
I like that idea.
Well, I think China did. It's called the Great Firewall.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that works.
What I find interesting, though, as all these Facebook things unfold, I think what's hurting Facebook's revenue potentially is the way it's treating advertisers. And so my personal experiences are with the Stogie Geek show. Had a great presence on Facebook. It was growing. And the minute you go to take out an ad, Facebook's like, yeah,
Your tobacco.
you're associated with tobacco. So our policy is, even though you're not selling tobacco, you're just doing a podcast about tobacco, that you can't take out ads. So I pick up all my toys and I go home on the Stogie Geeks podcast. With Security Weekly, we were distributing a bunch of stuff automatically into Facebook, and two things happened. One, they changed their API. I don't understand the reasons behind why all these APIs have to constantly change all the time, and there's no backwards compatibility, and they just seem to be changing things for the sake of changing things, just like Linux distributions do. But the other thing that happened was our videos, even if we took out ads, were just getting squashed. That automatic ability. So before they changed the API, I noticed a point where all of a sudden our stuff was just going down into the toilet in terms of impressions. Because after the whole political debacle, is my guess, they changed how all their algorithms worked. It just making it super difficult to really be effective at marketing on Facebook, or at least set the bar high enough where you just went and found other avenues to advertise.
And the challenge for them is that's their revenue model.
Yeah.
That's where they make their money, because
their policies and in terms of content, and their policies in terms of how they treat ads have drastically changed. And I think a lot of people picked up the toys, went home and said, I'm just going to take out an ad on Reddit. That's whatever. Or I'm going to do LinkedIn or Twitter or
whatever.
Go somewhere else.
Right. And then you have an $8 billion fine
on top
with
of all that.
with all that. Yeah.
Then the drama where people are leaving Facebook.
Yeah.
It's
not looking good for.
It's not
it
good
hasn't
on
been a
Facebook.
good 2019 for Facebook.
No.
It's not looking good.
No.
And it's not over yet.
This is true. It's not over
Oh,
yet.
wait, there's more.
Yes.
What are they going to do next?
Yeah.
We're gonna move to the next story.
So Larry, this story is just for you, my friend.
Yeah.
A hacker could locate thousands of cars and kill their engines. Apparently, Lorenzo Franceschi Biccarai.
Lorenzo.
Bicchiere.
Lorenzo is a hacker who claims he managed to break into accounts belonging to users of GPS tracker apps, allowing him to monitor the locations of tens of thousands of vehicles, even granting him the ability to turn off the engine as some of them are moving. I didn't dig into the article to get the tie-in to, I get GPS, Larry, you've talked about GPS and how you can basically hack into the protocols and figure out where stuff is. I don't know how that translates into turning off the engine.
Yeah, I don't understand either that.
Unless he hacked into the GPS and used it as a launch point to get to the other electronics on the car.
To get into the CAN bus. Did I use that term correctly, Larry? The CAN bus.
Hello, car bus.
Yep.
And then once he's
let's
there,
get
he
on the
pretty
bus
much
and
has
have
full
fun.
control of the car.
Well, and that's something
potentially.
we've speculated on the show or talked about, actually, not even speculated, that depending on the car manufacturer, once it's kind of like those old hubs versus switches. Once you're on the hub, you can do whatever you want and access everything, right? There's no separation.
So I read the article, and just now, looking for that one spot, and he says the risk didn't stop at the data breach and the monitoring of vehicle locations. The hacker also claimed he would have been able to turn off the engine of some vehicles when traveling at slow speed, under 20 kilometers per hour. That's it.
That's it.
Okay, so obviously this is European-based. He's probably Italian, based on his name.
So the
lot of vowels
and the
in
map that was provided is in Morocco.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Okay.
I think the funniest line in the whole article is, it all boiled down to the same underlying code, which explains why they both suffer from the same catastrophic flaw of using a default password.
Of the password was.
Oh, it didn't say what it was.
Yes, it did. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Oh, it did. It did.
The
1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
password
6.
to my
Yeah.
luggage. Damn it.
That's it.
man,
Your luggage
I
is
hate
no
that.
longer secure.
Oh shit! How many
Well,
times?
there goes the planet.
That makes me think my kids really need to watch Spaceballs now.
They haven't watched it already?
They are huge. In ironically enough, the one that is named after one of the Star Wars characters is, although that's not what I tell my wife, but he is the biggest Star Wars fan,
Nice.
and I think they would get a huge kick out of Spaceballs now.
So when my wife and I
Yes.
met, my wife had never seen Star Wars, but she had only seen Spaceballs.
Mm.
And that's why you-
That puts a whole different light on
Oh
Star
yeah, it
Wars.
does. It does.
and that's why you married her.
Wasn't the only reason, but certainly didn't help. I
She
certainly
decided to
didn't
hang out with you.
hurt. Yeah. Well, yeah, that.
I had a lot of really good stories too that we could
You
just
did.
plow through. This one I put not +1 but +1,000, and I really love it. It's titled "Ramblings of a
Yeah.
Recovering Academic on the So-Called Lack of Security
I
Talent."
really wanted to hear your opinion.
and
on this.
I want to read this because
But I can relate to this.
I picked out these couple of sentences from the article that really just, and I'm assuming the author has an academic background, that he's a PhD in computer science, and is writing an article about the talent shortage, and just so succinctly captured. We share feelings on this subject, and his words are very eloquent, and I couldn't have replicated this. So he says, in reality, the false impression that available jobs are unattractive may be a symptom of miscommunication between candidates and employers, and misunderstandings about an academic researcher's skills and interests, which run deep in the industry.
deep.
In turn, the ability to source candidates from academia may be leading to a perceived lack of senior talent in the field. I was like you got to read that a couple
Nailed
of
it.
times and really
Nailed.
digest it. And once you do, you're like, yeah, you nailed it. In like 3 sentences, dude, like you nailed it.
We've talked about aspects on BSW about the interview process and the aspects of the hiring side, right? And there's definitely some gaps in the way we interview for some of this talent, the expectations of what somebody needs to be effective in this space. You know,
Yeah,
a lot
so
of HR departments are
take
like, well, you got to have a bachelor's of science degree.
Yeah, we've stated it, but not as succinctly and eloquently as the author did. The false impression that available jobs are unattractive may be a symptom of miscommunication between candidates and employers. That means the candidates are trying to build skills, and the employers are trying to hire and seek out those skills, but they're just not in sync
Right.
at all. And it's not a skills gap necessarily. It's a miscommunication, as he states it.
There was a humorous tweet that I saw the other day that, maybe a couple weeks ago, that reminded me of something like this. That what human resources department put in those job advertisements and so forth and so on, and it was along the lines of an HR department looking for 6 years of experience in Jira, the new reverse engineering disassembly program.
Right.
And the comment was, you may not realize it, but many people in your network may actually have 6 years of experience in it because they worked at the NSA and have been using it for 6 years.
Right.
So,
And that's a very small pool, which again
agreed,
goes to the miscommunication.
But
Because like what you're looking for is someone who has the aptitude to do reverse engineering.
right.
And you should hire based on aptitude, not necessarily skill level.
Right.
Yeah, you're looking for a mindset.
Yes.
You're not looking for specific listed skills. You're looking for the way people approach a problem. And so, people should be looking at it from that perspective. And that paragraph was perfect, Paul. I think it absolutely.
And so the other sentence, misunderstandings about an academic researcher's skills and interests. In other words, you may have a master's or PhD in some discipline. Does that mean that there's only like 3 jobs that you can go do? That's not what
because
it's
you
saying.
can apply that knowledge to
just-
other fields.
Sure.
Right.
Or the other one is you need a certain degree. Is the other one that always just drives me nuts.
Yep.
Is everybody? Not everybody has to get a bachelor's of science degree in engineering to be effective in our field necessarily.
Right. Yeah, someone
but
who has,
they eliminate candidates because they don't have the degree requirement.
someone may have a PhD go ahead, John.
Just a comment on that. I would rephrase it to, you need to have a degree, not a certain degree. Because I think a degree is useful, because it demonstrates that you are willing to hang in there and put up with a bunch of shit to get to the other end.
No, I
Right?
agree. The degree largely represents that you have the skill of perseverance, or the characteristic of perseverance to reach an end goal.
To
right?
work hard to reach
Yes.
an end goal.
Yes.
And that's laudable. But a certain degree, it's the same kind of thing as this PhD is talking about. You know, it's like, no, you have the aptitude to learn. That's all I really care about.
Aptitude and mindset. I look at my oldest son, right?
A long-term project.
And as security people, we most of us can pick this out, right? At a very young age. I'd be driving around with my oldest son, and it could be like the most boring situation. We're driving through a neighborhood, and there's just house after house. There's really not much to look at. It's kind of a boring situation. And he'll just turn to me and go, you know, Dad, a lot of these houses have garages, and there's a door on the side of the garage. It's like, I really hope people remember to lock those doors, because that could be a really like big security hole. Like, all right, that like you need to come up with some kind of field that applies that aptitude, because not everyone drives through a damn boring neighborhood and looks at the doors and goes, "That's a potential security."
Is that unlocked?
Is that unlocked, or is it not?
Wait, can I pick that lock?
Yeah, exactly.
On the converse,
man.
my roommate in college, he said to me, my dad was really smart, and when we'd go in rides in the car, I'd ask him like a question like, "Dad, how does TV work?" And he'd go on this like an hour-long conversation about how the minutia of television works, and the into the ether and all this type of stuff. And I find myself doing that.
Yep.
Like, we'll come back home from karate, and that's typically the philosophical time. And my daughter asks, like, "Hey, Daddy, how does this work?" And I go on the minutia details about how something works. Like, "Daddy, how does a car work?"
Oh, my son, my middle son did that,
yeah.
and I was with my nephew. And he was driving, which is bad because he has his learner's permit, and I was supposed to be helping him drive. But my middle son asked, he's like, "Dad, like why is it night and day?" And I'm like, "Oh, this is great. We can talk about planets and Earth's rotation, going on this like whole big long
And the tilt
thing.
that gives us our seasons.
Yeah, right? Like the whole thing, and try to make him understand." I look at my nephew, I'm like, "How is that?" Like in the meantime, he probably went through like 8 stop signs. I was like, "Oh crap! I'm supposed to be teaching you how to drive."
Right. Well, it's like my daughter. She's into cars now.
Mm-hmm.
She knows almost as much about cars now than I do today. Because she's asking me questions. I'm helping her through it, but she's doing stuff I never did at her age. Hell, I don't even know that I can do them now. And it just, when you set your mind to something and you're interested in the topic, you're going to figure it out, right? You're going to ask enough questions. You're going to look at enough YouTube videos. She's going to figure it out. There's a lot of people out there that have really good base skill sets, that have the base understanding, base knowledge
To go figure it out.
Figure it out. And those are people that we should be bringing into our industry, because they will be good, because they'll be like, wait, something's not right. I'm going to go figure this out. And they're going to grow in their careers, and they're going to do something brilliant eventually.
You know, we say that in our, and I think we very carefully tried to craft our job description for the open developer. By the way, we're looking for a developer here in Rhode Island to work in the studio and office with us. And yeah, like our apps that support production are built in Python. But like if you tell me that you have programmed in C or Java or any other language, like you're gonna pick up Python.
Pick it up.
You're gonna pick up Python. What I'm looking for more is the willingness to learn a new language, to learn cloud and containers, and because that's where we're going in Python. But I'm looking for that aptitude, not like whether or not you know Python. Like that's seemingly irrelevant.
If you do, bonus. But
I'm a
but if
crappy
you know a language, you can learn another language.
I'm a crappy
Oh,
programmer, and I figured it out to cobble us along. Imagine if we had a developer that actually was talented at writing software. You'd pick up Python, and by the way, they're not doing it in between recording shows and all this other meetings and all this other stuff,
yeah,
right?
right.
Like you're gonna be fine.
It's like when I hired Sean. He knew .NET,
Yeah.
and we were building in Java. He figured it out.
He figured it
and
out.
he figured it
Yeah,
out really
'cause
damn
Sean has
fast. And
that-
now he's one of the best, brilliant
Cloud
Java
engineer.
cloud
Yeah,
minds that I
yeah.
know, right?
Right.
And I bring him up often because
He has
didn't
no
finish-
degree.
He has no degree. He didn't finish school because he got busy programming originally in .NET into Java, and now he's been doing all this stuff. I mean, people who understand how to code are going to figure these things out, and they're going to evolve as the technology evolves, and they will pick it up super fast.
I think just like security is more of a mindset than anything else, software development and software engineering is a mindset.
Yes.
It really is.
And to the degree thing, I think if you have the right mindset, the degree or lack thereof is irrelevant. So, for example, my former intern, who we've hired full-time, graduated high school and was like, I don't really want to go to college.
Yeah, like
and,
why?
And I interviewed her and was like, I'm hire you now, because she had this mindset of, there's a problem I want to solve. I'm going to learn about everything that I can to solve this problem and solve the problem. And the problem was that she wanted to play 2048, the game of matching tiles. She wanted to play that, but they weren't allowed to have phones at school. So she wrote it on her TI calculator and had to learn TI assembly to do it.
And that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I'm going to hire you. Yeah, I'm going to hire you.
You start tomorrow.
I'll give you the inverse. I have 2 degrees. I don't use either one.
Right.
I have a bachelor's in electrical engineering, a master's in computer engineering. I haven't done anything on the double E side for 20 plus years. And I mean, where do I use my Comp E degree? I don't code anymore. I mean, yeah, I can figure out a Google function, but I haven't coded since I graduated in 96 to age myself.
I have a degree in business. I took some classes in marketing, and like I wish I had paid attention. So when I had to learn marketing, I would talk to people who are really good at marketing, and I would like take roles in marketing and figure it out, and that's how I learned it. So.
It reminds me of the story that I tell in the wireless class about Josh. Was that we had tried to get Josh on the podcast for many moons on a Thursday night, and he couldn't come on the podcast. And we asked him, Josh, like, you haven't been able to come on the podcast for like 2 years, or at least a year. And he said, yeah, I'm at the university auditing a couple courses. Like, what? Like, oh yeah, I'm auditing calculus and trigonometry.
Yeah, he took calculus and trigonometry.
I'm like, who the hell does that?
And he audited the class, which means he doesn't get credit for it.
Yeah.
Yep.
He's there just to learn because he doesn't care about the credits towards the degree. He just wants to learn.
Yep. And you know why? Because he had forgotten all of it when he went to college, and he wanted to put this little speedometer thing in his code so that he could map Wi-Fi signal strength to an ellipse. And I'm like,
it was to apply it to his Wi-Fi and security engineering. Yeah, he had a problem.
Yeah.
As Joe McRae told me, he was taking classes in database administration. He had no intention of building databases or applications or being a DBA. He's like, I wanted to learn how it worked so I could learn better how to break it. And Joe to this day is one of the most talented people in SQL. I mean, that dude can like look at applications, and if he gets a SQL command working, like make it work on the fly from off the top of his head. And he's like, dude, I took database classes. Like that's the kind of person that you're.
I did too. I don't remember a darn lick.
Yeah, I don't remember.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
I took database classes that they were IDMSR, not terribly applicable these days.
Chalk that up to
it was in Fortran, so it was cool.
Speaking of Oracle, there is an unpatched 0-day flaw in Oracle. Deserialization, remote code execution vulnerability.
Which will patch next quarter on their quarterly patch cycle.
Right.
No, but what was interesting is they called this highly critical. Now, I've seen critical vulnerabilities. I've seen high vulnerabilities. I don't think I remember many being highly critical.
In today's day and age, when you can remotely execute arbitrary commands using a specially crafted HTTP request without any authorization, could be why it was highly critical.
To the showdown!
Because
if you can execute arbitrary commands on the server without authorization, you may be running WordPress.
20 years ago, it was very difficult to find and map the entire internet. Now there's like so many people that have an entire database and are doing that kind of thing.
They're doing it constantly.
Where if you have an unauthenticated, remotely executable exploit that you can fingerprint the internet, it's bad.
And guess what Oracle WebLogic sit in front of? Your Oracle CRM.
Yeah, like big CRM,
your ERP,
important
all this
systems.
stuff, right? I mean, it's sitting in front of all the Oracle
really
systems.
important Oracle stuff, whatever it is.
Whatever it is, with a lot of highly sensitive data, I'm sure, in it, and that's sitting there and
critical to your business operations.
Yeah.
But my business doesn't matter. Nobody wants that data.
Yes, we do.
Yours we want, Lee. Nobody else.
Man.
I don't care about your data, Lee, but I'm just going to encrypt it and then ask for a ransom.
Yeah.
If your data doesn't really matter to me.
All righty.
Right?
That's it.
I couldn't tell this article, story number 9, bootleg streaming devices. I wasn't sure. Like, they were very non-specific about the platform.
Yep.
And I'm not sure if it was basically just trying to say Kodi without saying Kodi.
I think it's Kodi or devices that are pre-installed coming from China running Kodi already.
Yep.
Type of thing.
That would be my guess. I don't know any other streaming device platform or app that's ubiquitous like Kodi that has add-ons that largely go unchecked. Which should kind of, I think, start to curb people's usage because there's been a lot of exploits on that. Basically preying on, I don't know if it's a problem or a need or a combination of both, that I want to be able to consume content, and I don't even know that it's I don't want to pay for it, right? I think that consumers are willing to pay for content. The problem today is I don't want to pay 8 different providers for content. I don't want to pay Amazon for content because they have stuff that's only on Amazon, and then I have to pay Netflix, and then I have to pay Hulu, and now if you're a Star Wars fan, you're going to want to pay Disney because The Mandalorian is only going to be streamed on their new platform. I mean, that one I may actually pay for because I really want to see The Mandalorian, right? My other alternative is I choose 1 or 2 services that I do want to pay for,
Right.
and then I pirate the rest because I don't want to pay for 6 streaming services at $10 or $8 a month or whatever it is. I mean, I want to ditch cable, but if my cable's, $60 or $80 a month and I'm paying $10 to $15 a month to all these 6 different services, then my cost is like the same now. And as a consumer, I think it really sucks.
Yeah,
The
I mean, if
problem
you want to
is-
cut the cable, you can't offset that with 8, 10 different services to replace cable at the same price. I mean, we haven't had cable.
Right.
Oh my gosh, I haven't had cable in probably over 5 years. We're Amazon Prime and Netflix.
Yep.
And we just switch back and forth depending on what show we're watching. And I call it good. I don't get live TV anymore. And outside of HD antenna, but
we're basic cable with a system that lets me distribute it over the network. So I have one cable device that I can stream to 4 TVs from basic cable, very low cost.
yeah, because they charge you for extra.
They
every
charge
extra
you for
job.
everything,
Like,
and then I
nuts.
supplement that with Amazon and Hulu, and then the kids will ask why don't we have Netflix? I'm like, we pay for cable, we pay for Amazon, and we pay for Hulu. Like, that's it. Like, I'm not. How many other streaming services do we have to subscribe to? Like, it reaches.
Dad, it's
everyone's
only
limit,
$10 a month more. Come on.
right?
Yeah,
So,
but if
Right?
somebody took all those and aggregated them and then gave me a service, even if it was $30-$40 a month, it'd be well worth it.
Or if it was $10 a month, and then I want to watch The Mandalorian from Disney. Well, that's like a $2 a month upcharge, or I pay $30 and I get each $30 per season.
I can watch that series $2 for the month, and I retain them for 90 days.
Exactly.
So I can catch up.
Exactly.
So
I want to watch what I want to watch across all the.
we're a little bit different. We pay out the ass for cable because we have DVRs in 3 rooms, and
Sure.
but we do that and we record tons of content, and we also have
Then you stream it back out to other people who pay you a subscription for it.
No,
Oh, I like that. I like that.
because it's the the proprietary cable box, and I'm just not hands off.
That's highly illegal, by the way.
Yeah, I know.
Sling box type thing. But we also have Prime and Netflix. Now, the Netflix was out of other need from years ago, and the Prime is because of the free shipping from Amazon.
Yeah,
Well, yeah.
I agree. Prime
So-
is kind of like
So we use those, and I keep those, and I use those video services because I'm finding that when I travel, I watch so much on those services that I can download and do those contents on airplanes and hotels and you name it. That I've actually started traveling with a Roku in my bag that I plug into the hotel TV and
There
try
you
to
go.
make work. But I've actually considered subscribing for YouTube Red, the one without ads.
YouTube's Red's another one. Yep.
Because I'm finding that I'm watching so much content on YouTube that getting rid of those ads is also huge.
Now, some of the hotels actually allow you to log into Netflix and Prime and other things now.
The problem is how you log out and wipe your account out.
You gotta remember to log out, but at least it gives you the ability in the hotel room if you want to watch from your Netflix. You don't have to carry your Roku.
Right.
They'll actually give you an ability to log into it right at the TV.
What hotels are you staying at?
I'm Marriott's.
Okay, I'm a Hilton, and they don't have that.
That's why.
Yeah, the Marriott's do it. Like,
Now,
I'm the same way.
If you're going to pirate the content, you could face fines, which was covered in this article. And the other thing is, and I think they're referring to apps on Kodi, this one called Mobdro, forwards the Wi-Fi network name and password to servers in Indonesia. Other apps collect data on the user, including photos and videos on the network, and upload them to a server. In one case, an app collected more than a terabyte of data after getting connected to the network. Of course, we know what these apps do. There's one called Free Netflix that uses stolen Netflix accounts. They would constantly rotate. So there's a lot of shady stuff going on.
Terabyte of data, not a. You said a megabyte.
No, he said a terabyte. He said a terabyte.
Did he say terabyte?
Yeah, he said
I thought I said terabyte. Yeah.
Terabyte.
Yep.
So
and that's kind of interesting in that, I think about that, and I think about my new TV that we got not too long ago with Hulu, YouTube, Netflix built into the TV.
Oh, yeah.
And
all the smart TVs
DLNA server.
Yep.
And because I run Plex now at home to serve my media stream to DLNA, and that could be interesting.
there's some shady stuff happening on what they call bootleg streaming devices.
Well, I mean, it's a huge market now.
Yeah,
Of course.
because of all the things that we've outlined.
Yep.
So, Joff, this one's for you. How a Nigerian ISP accidentally hijacked the internet. My comment was BGP for the loss.
Right?
You would think that network engineers at this level would, like in BGP itself, could prevent these things from happening, but they still happen today, Joff. Why is that? Is that?
Well, it surprises me, right? First of all, secure peering. I mean, you should trust your peers. You should be authenticating your peers. That stuff goes without doubt. But then you can certainly have a malicious peer, even if you trust them and you authenticate them, that can inject any route, right?
Right. So someone makes it's an insider threat, right? It's not necessarily an external threat actor or someone who's malicious that says, I want to take down the internet or take down Google. It's someone that goes, oops, I fat-fingered an IP address or something. I made a mistake.
That malicious peer that you trust could just be an idiot.
Or some of them, I mean, we're human. We all make
they
mistakes.
Could.
Yeah.
They could. Mistakes are made, right? And this is why a lot of people... So routing forwarding bases work on longest prefix match, right? So if you have a more specific prefix and you inject it into the global BGP table,
right,
you're going to win.
So, and Joff, I'll let you continue because this next sentence is very applicable to what you just said. Ultimately, what that meant was that for around 74 minutes, most traffic destined for Google and Cloudflare services from around the world was routed through Russia into China and onto Main One, which is an ISP in Nigeria.
Yeah, yeah. So there's ways to there's ways to make that happen, right? I mean, let's say you have a /16. Let's say Google or whomever have a /16. Well, if you inject 4 /18s into the route table for covering that /16, guess what?
More
the routes
specific.
are coming to you.
Right.
They're more specific. They're longer prefix.
It's BGP is doing its job in getting you to the place you're trying to go faster, right? Essentially.
Well, that's exactly right. So a lot of ISPs sensibly will cut off prefixes up to a certain limit. There's a lot that will not accept prefixes that are longer than /24. They're just saying if you're more specific than that in IPv4, I'm just not accepting it.
Gotcha.
Which is a solid security mechanism. They'll also look at AS path length and all kinds of other things. So there's a lot of very common mechanisms, but it's still a trust model. That's the fundamental challenge. And I think to some extent, rightfully so. And I don't think with a distance vector routing protocol, I don't think you could make it any different than a trust model. But
right.
A combination of accidents and potential maliciousness can still happen in a trust model, right? So that's it in a nutshell.
What you did.
I love that.
I was going to say
Distance vector routing model. That's yes.
Well, as opposed to a link state routing model.
Right.
You know, there's Dijkstra's algorithm, which is link state. There's distance vector, which is only the next hop knows. Is basically the short way of saying that. Whereas the link state routing protocol models,
Now, OSPF
everybody on the network knows.
Is OSPF a link state?
Yeah, OSPF is link state.
And,
It's Dijkstra
and RIP V1 and V2 are also link state.
No, RIP is a distance vector
RIP
protocol.
is distance. Okay. Oh, no, yeah, because the same thing can happen with RIP because that happened when I was at the university.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. ISIS, and EIGRP.
Yep,
I'm trying to remember. I think EIGRP may be a distance vector as well.
Gotcha.
Somebody will correct me.
All fascinating stuff. You know, we talk about, cloud and application security, app user data, right? It comforts me to know that there's still security being applied to traditional network protocols that run the internet and
Well, they have to
get
because
your stuff
it's running
from point
the
A to
internet.
point B. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, see, I've actually consulted with customers on this before, and I've said, look, I've gone into networks, and I've sat there on the network on a user segment, and I've seen OSPF advertisements that are not authenticated, and I go grab the guys. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? I mean, straight up, I'm like, you are advertising route protocol on user segments first. No, don't do that. Second, they're unauthenticated, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot, right?
Joff, my favorite is when they do that over the unencrypted open guest wireless network.
Right.
and people
Ask
do
me
that.
how
It's
I know
like,
this.
Because you've seen it.
And exploited it.
If again, this is a theme that we talked about earlier. It comes back to architecture and design. You've got to know your environment. You've got to architect it well, and you've got to not make these rookie mistakes. I mean, that's stuff that can be exploited so easily. And if you come in, you have some 2-bit vendor that does set and forget, you're going to get what you paid for. It's, and I'm sorry for you, but that's not the world you want to live in, right? You've got to authenticate your peers. You've got to advertise only across the links that are router to router, not on your user segments. And you've got to set the appropriate security controls in place on all those devices. I
think it's also a great point to mention that if you're doing failover type protocols, what is Cisco? VSRP is Cisco's?
VRRP or HSRP.
VRP or HSRP, right? And there's open source implementations of them. I could do some tech segments on some of the open source ones because I've implemented them here in the studio. But those fall in the same thing. Like basically, if you can inject yourself, right, you can become the default route for the entire segment potentially, or the route, or one of the routes for the segment, because you can basically just opt for an IP address in there, and if it's not authenticated, game over.
Same goes with spanning tree. If you advertise spanning tree protocol at a higher priority level, well, there's nothing to say that me as an end node on the network, if the switch is not secured properly, that I could not advertise spanning tree at a lower priority number, which essentially is higher priority, right? Lower digit, integer digit, and I become the path. And if I put an Ethernet cable between 2 ports on the same switch, and I advertise spanning tree like I am the preferred path at a lower bridging priority number, guess where the traffic goes?
Right.
It goes through me, right?
And this is one reason why you should not be running Telnet. Or anything unencrypted. Yeah. Yes.
Exactly. So those kinds of first hop redundancy protocol exploits and spanning tree exploits at layer 2, these are classic examples of local broadcast segment things, same thing with like ARPcast portioning and stuff that could get you into real big trouble. And there are plenty of ways to take advantage of.
I find it interesting that I don't think a lot of these are in use today as pen testers or attackers because it's relatively easy to escalate to domain admin in most environments. I think it's
we tend to focus on the hosts,
right? But if once those start getting more difficult, we could see a resurgence of these types of attacks on the network.
Well, I could have a whole new consulting career then.
Right? What is old will be new again, Joff. That's one thing I think. Almost 14 years, doing this show.
My God.
We can bank on, right?
Yeah, this industry, it
comes
happens.
full circle all the time. And I don't know if this is coming full circle, but certainly something that we've talked about. That this, my only comment to this was, finally, like it's about freaking time. and I think this is going to resonate with everyone here and our audience. So the latest draft for baseline configuration for Windows 10 version 1903 and Windows Server 1903 drops the tedious requirement of rotating passwords. So
Finally.
basically,
Oh my God. Finally.
Microsoft is dropping the requirement for password expiration because they finally realized that it has no bearing on security, that people just use password 1, password 2, password 3. If
Yeah,
you make it
exactly.
more
Arguably
complicated
makes
than
it
that,
worse.
it's password 1 exclamation point, right? It's not.
You encourage user sequencing behavior, which is
Yes,
a bad idea.
yes. You're-
Password bang at pound dollar.
yeah, whatever they can do to get around it, because it's an inconvenience to the user, forcing them to just continue to choose poor passwords.
Correct.
And it's refreshing to see that Microsoft is implementing this.
Well, as long as if we get it away from the auditing community as well, I hope that happens. It's like this 90-day rotation idea. Terrible idea. Terrible idea. Like, go long and strong. And
we've been saying this for 20 years, though.
Yeah.
20 years. We've been like, why are you forcing users to change their password? This is just a step backwards.
If it's long and strong,
It's down to get
it's
the friction
harder
on.
to break.
I was waiting for somebody.
You didn't have to wait that long. You didn't even finish the sentence.
It's nice having company down here in the gutter.
Why rotate it?
Fellas, his girlfriend got the butt.
That's what you want.
Hell yeah!
Shake it. Shake that nasty butt.
Baby got it back.
I had a guy telling me
God
today
damn it, that
he
was my
wanted to have a
password. Now I gotta
6-character
change it.
generated password.
Gotta shake that damn password up now.
Oh, man. No twerking in public.
God damn it! Pick my password.
Oh, never mind.
Right?
No twerking in public. Was that yours?
Yeah, add that to the dictionary. Right?
And then he had an 01 on the end, and then an 02, and then an 02.
No, he had a 1 bang, a 2
No
at.
twerking
and
in
then-
public yesterday. No twerking in public today. No twerking in public tomorrow. Next quarter. Next.
Oh, man.
I think
I'm going to make it super secure. I'm putting the year on the end.
this
Yeah,
wasn't
there you go.
this wasn't the most interesting story, but crooks are using the GitHub platform to host phishing
This
sites.
is pretty cool.
I mean, we kind of knew this was going to happen, right? I mean,
Oh, of
this
course.
is. I think this is why there are so many ridiculous restrictions on so many services we have today, largely because since the beginning of computing and the internet, people have abused these services, right? It's why when I write API interfaces that there's so many quotas and limits because people abuse it, right?
Yep.
It's why we can't have nice things like
This is how we
host
dance.
web pages in GitHub because attackers are like, oh, I can host my phishing website in GitHub. This is
Wait,
great.
I'm feeling a little guilty right now as a pen tester.
Because you do this. Everyone in yeah, exactly. This is
And Joff, to that, the amazing part for some of this is you start abusing the domain trust. Like, how many web
because
applications?
GitHub's in the Alexa top 1,000 or whatever,
and
right?
And how
Exactly.
many inspection services, desktop, you name it, trust GitHub.io because GitHub has that trust and that implied trust, and they don't necessarily check by subdomain.
What this
Right.
manifests to is some of my experiences this week where I'm trying to use the YouTube API, for example, and you're limited as the number of requests that you can make, and that differs per API from Google. Now, as Matt pointed out, YouTube was a Google acquisition. Their API is a friggin' hot mess. And when I was asking Joff before, and let me just put this PSA out there. I'll ask the question, have you ever used the YouTube API? If your answer is no, make sure it's always no. Like, don't ever go
Don't
there
even
because it's a
try it.
friggin' hot mess. And one of the reasons I believe it's a hot mess is because of situations like this. Because people have abused it, they have to put limitations and quotas inside of it. And what that means is I ran into some instances this week where I wanted to use the API, I ran out of requests, and they're like, oh, you can submit a form to apply to have an increased quota. And so when you start filling out the form, it's this extremely lengthy and painful.
It's like 5 pages of data.
It's
to
like an
apply.
NSA interrogation or like
What are you using
polygraph
the
test.
API for? What
Why are you
application
using
is
the
it? What are you doing with
Tell
it?
me about your application. What does it do? How many requests do you want to make? Why do you want to make those requests? If you couldn't make those requests, how would that impact your application? And I'm like, I just want to gouge my eyes out with a fork right now because
So that was like
horrified.
formerly filling out the AWS pen test permission form.
Yes.
How many
very
requests
similar.
do you think you're going to do? 500,000. Oh, that seems excessive. So you go and revise it to 5,000.
5
Okay, that
million.
looks good.
Right.
5 million.
And so, but I imagine that GitHub is now going to have some of these protections in there to prevent this from happening in the future because, again, it's why we can't have nice things.
I think some of us have been known to use sites like that for delivery of certain specimens in certain cases, and
Right.
you know what? Can you blame us?
Joff,
I mean,
you are why we can't have nice things. Damn it.
Next thing, this article will be about Microsoft OneDrive.
Mm-hmm.
Did
Can
I
that
just say
host
that out
web?
loud?
Wait,
Did
can
I
that-
just say that out loud? Sorry.
Can that host files or websites or just files?
Files.
Just files, yeah.
Yeah. it's like
Which your
Google Drive.
GitHub.io website points to OneDrive.
Oh,
I mean,
interesting.
Jeff's
it does under
Jeff's
the-
taking notes.
It does under the
I
new
am.
merger acquisition
Yeah.
framework.
Yeah.
Yes. Great.
What's your shit at OneDrive? I mean,
Oh man.
Oh boy.
Don't do
No,
it.
I've got better ways. We can take that offline, Larry.
yes, yeah. Remind me let's talk over the next week or so.
Let's talk.
Let's talk about the black hole.
Yes,
It's always a good thing.
yes.
And what about the black hole?
Oh,
No.
I was just
Which
throwing it out.
one?
I was
So this is Johnny's story,
This is
And-
my story.
and I
Johnny's
thought
story.
this was amazing that scientist, PhD scientist, came up with some methods for being able to render terabytes of data into a single image to actually give us the first image of what a black hole looks like.
Okay, but hold on. Let's name her, so we're
Name.
just not talking about the woman. Dr. Katie Bowman?
Katie Bowman.
Katie Bowman.
Dr. Katie Bowman, 29-year-old computer scientist, created the algorithm that was able to capture the picture of the black hole.
Yes.
Katie
She's
created
awesome.
the algorithm,
Yes.
which is a computer science accomplishment in and of itself. Others implemented the code. I mean, everyone deserves kudos here.
Yeah.
And you can't take anything away from Katie, who developed the algorithm.
Right.
Like, that's awesome.
5
She's right.
petabytes
She's
of
right.
5
data.
petabytes
5
of
petabytes.
data.
So
crazy.
thousands of terabytes. I misspoke.
A metric ass fuck ton.
Yes.
Thank you, Joff.
And that is the actual imperial term, the imperial measurement, right? A metric fuck ton, right?
Metric ass fuck ton.
Yeah, an ass
That's
fuck
a
ton.
lot of
My
data.
apologies.
Yeah, don't forget you got to have the nuances.
Because if it was not the imperial, it would be the. No, that's the metric. If it was the imperial, it would also be a ton, but it would have a different value for said
It's
ton.
a great article. Johnny was showing me this article. It talks about the next computer where Steve Jobs founded the operating system used a black hole as the trash can.
Yep.
which was
and
awesome, by the way.
There was like debates about like the people that wrote the code
Yeah.
were like trying to take credit or something.
No, other way around. Like the internet trolls
Mm-hmm.
bashed Katie for quote taking credit for this image.
She developed that algorithm.
But she developed the algorithm that her team, which she gave credit to for the team,
Right.
converted that paper algorithm into actual
correct.
computer code.
Mm-hmm.
And trolls were giving her shit because her GitHub commits were significantly less than her mail counterparts.
Just
No.
'cause trolls are trolls.
Like this is like in the Force Awakens where BB-8 has just a part of the map where Luke Skywalker
right.
is. R2-D2 has the other part of the map.
Yep.
This is totally that.
Yeah.
Like
You have to.
Katie had
Bring
the
it up.
pieces of the map. The programmers had the other. It was a team. It was a team effort. Like in both sides.
Katie
were-
had the critical part for the map that
Right.
without the rest of the team's map was useless.
Yeah. It's just an outstanding
this was
effort
a
by
team
all.
effort.
Exactly, by all involved. And we see this I mean, we have all seen this countless times in our careers, right? There's people that are designing and people that are implementing, and you can't have one without the other, right? Like, you need the people that design.
To build an algorithm, you have to figure out how to embed it into code. So I have, Sean and I patented an algorithm on how to do risk calculations, but Sean had to implement it in code. In code. And when you think about what we were doing back then, this was 04, 05, the math was not easy to implement in code because the way we built the concept of the algorithm was an exponential equation where you could literally run the computer out of memory before you could finish calculating a result. So we had to modify aspects of how you actually calculated that on a computer because the theoretical algorithm would not fit in the memory footprint of a computer, right? And so
team effort.
It's a team effort. You come up with the concept for the algorithm going, this makes sense on how we should calculate risk, and that was the algorithm was about. But when you actually had to apply it into computer code, you had to realize what the limitations of the physical hardware would be to actually make it work. And it takes work to figure those two pieces out. You need the coders who understand, oh yeah, you're trying to do this to like the nth power, and like, dude, at some point, n gets so big.
We're going to run out of resources. Yeah.
And so Sean was really good at understanding how to take things and try to create things more linearly instead of exponentially in the way he had to code it.
What the internet trolls do not understand in their limited capacity is that this happens all the time, that there are people who create the algorithm and there are people who implement it in code, and they work together in teams all the time on very small scales. Our crappy little stats application, we've done that probably 10 times over, right?
At least.
Really, really smart people are doing this at a grand scale to do things like map a black hole for the first time. This is how technology works. It's not about who's taking credit for what. This is how computer science feats are accomplished, is working together in this capacity.
We don't have unlimited compute.
Yeah. Exactly.
And when you don't have unlimited compute, you have to make adjustments.
We don't have unlimited quotas on the YouTube API.
Right. We don't.
So therefore, we have to, right?
For everybody to know.
Related conversation I want to and ask our listeners as well, and Matt, if you have something in mind, to that of having somebody to take an idea and implement it. I have an idea. And right now, this is an honest question for our listeners, and Matt, for you, from experience that's local. I have an idea, and I can describe ad infinitum the technical components that would go into implementing said idea. It has not been implemented, but I need someone to translate
that idea into
a patent. If you know somebody that can do that, or if our audience knows someone that can do that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, there's really good patent lawyers
out
there that. Wow, man! Holy cow!
I'm
do you have a
thirsty.
straw over there?
I'm thirsty.
That's our last bottle.
It is. This is bottle number 3.
When we did the patent for Control Path at the time,
I've done one, by the way.
Sean and I had done a lot of the work, right? But we had to go hire a really good patent lawyer because the patent lawyer knows how to construct the patent application to really figure out how to get that idea patentable.
Yep.
And not all patents have to be actually, they can be more process and oriented versus actually implementable. In our case, we had both pieces by the time we did it. And that's what a patent lawyer is really, really good at. But it takes also sometimes somebody like a Sean Malloy's brain to wrap his head around the idea to say this is how you would implement, because when you have the idea and the implementation scheme, those patents typically get they're more likely to get approved because it's not only the theory but it's also the implementation of how you do it.
So it's interesting. Dave Kenny and I have this conversation all the time because we'll talk about how we design things and try and communicate those requirements. And oftentimes, Dave and I, we have a technical background, so we can write code. Albeit, we both admit, we're not like software engineers, but we can write code well enough so that it sort of works, and then give it to an engineer that can really go take it and make it into an actual software product.
Same.
And what Dave and I both experience, I don't know if we said this on air or off air, was that we'll have an idea, we'll communicate it to developers, we'll say, look, like I'll write you a prototype, and then we'll write something that's pretty close to what we, somewhat close to what we kind of envisioned, and we'll give it to them, and they're like, oh, like when you explained it to me, I didn't know that you meant this, that, and the other thing. And we're like, yeah, because that, like, my brain just kind of translated that into code, into like a prototype, and then like actual software developers go and like take that to the next level. And that's a really great way to go from concept or idea to actually working product. Is you're prototyping it and then giving it to the people that implement. And this is kind of like a similar thing, right? Like an algorithm to code is not. It's part art and part science, like all kind of blended together.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think that's where I'm at, is that I can describe the types of data, how I'd acquire it, how I'd store it, how I'd process it, the methods in which I'd process it, which I think are fairly unique, the capture methods, the reason why we would do this are fairly unique.
Yep.
Oh, or very unique.
What actual software developers do is
And
go, oh, I can do that better.
And that's great.
And that's fine. That's what you want.
But
That's what we want,
my problem is that I need someone to translate what's in my head to that patent application. So that developer that wants to implement it better has to license it from me.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like our stats engine code that I've been working on, right? Like I want to turn that over to like someone like Joff, who's a real developer, and go like, this is what I meant when I explained it to you. And Joff can go through the code and go, oh yeah, like I get that. And by the way, those like 16 lines of code I can do in like 1 line of code, right? Like kind of
16, 300.
Probably more like 300, right?
Yeah.
My Python regular expressions could
But
use some
what
cleaning up.
I've experienced with patent applications, because we did a number of them at Layered Insight. I managed the portfolio at Tenable for the IP and have done one myself. Is the theory to implementation, when those two come together in a patent application, they become really good bodies of work for patent approvals.
Right.
And you need aspects of the implementation to take the theory into that actual design and implementation. And so sometimes if it's just the theory, and there are companies that just patent the theory and the algorithm.
Yep.
IBM and others have been notorious for this over the years.
But they have
of
like teams
and
of
they
hundreds
have teams
of
like
patents
doing
of lawyers.
research and coming up with new algorithms and this, that, and the other thing that they're
But also they
patenting,
have
but there's no
attorneys.
implementations of them. But the ones that hold up the best are when you have both of those
The
components
implementation,
together.
Agreed. And I think I'm at a point where I have this idea that I can implement it, that I just need to have the time and the scale and the resources to make it happen. It's all pipe dream.
I'll sound a quick cautionary note. Having gone through the process, be very, very careful that you don't let it take on a life of its own and have the patent attorney folks put words in your mouth, because you can get into a situation where they're trying to put flesh on the bones just so that they can get paid. And you have to be a little bit careful when you're going through the process to make sure your idea is fully fleshed out, all the I's dotted, all the T's crossed, every possible question that you can imagine that will come up from an intellectual original proof of work perspective is answered. That's the kind of thing that you go through.
I wanted to transition to Johnny's other story as a virtual reality treatment for ADHD or ADD, right? I've heard of it. It's funny that we're talking about algorithms and patents and implementations. I've heard of at least 2 different non-pharmaceutical treatments for ADD or ADHD. This one uses virtual reality. Another one uses like some kind of patch or something you put on like the front of your head to help treat this particular symptom. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. So Joff and I both have autistic children. We did attempt medication at one time for Kyle, not successfully, by the way. Some of these psychotropic drugs I think are pretty dangerous potentially to kids.
Agreed.
And you see a lot of kids with autism, ADD, ADHD going out and doing cocaine derivatives, and we don't know the impacts of their brains. And so if you can find
there's a lot of substance abuse.
a lot,
in
just a
both
ton.
those,
And I mean, look, my wife's an RN, and we went through some treatments, and we didn't really see an improvement, and we're like, we're done, right? Because why mess with the brain in that way from a pharmaceutical perspective? Joff, I'm sure you have similar experiences.
Absolutely.
If there are ways to use non-therapeutic methods, and if virtual reality is a way, and I think it's an interesting article because I know how engaged my son is with the kind of the video. He does the group chat stuff with his friends. And it is something that I think it helps him because it helps him focus. He's with his friends. They're doing the group chats. And if virtual reality can instill aspects of that to treat aspects of what these kids have, I think this is a great idea because drugs are really scary about what they're going to do to these kids' brains, especially at their age. I mean, my son's 17. I mean, I think he was on Ritalin when he was he was probably 10, 11.
Yep, mine too.
Right? Yep. And that's the first place the docs will send you, right? They're like, oh, try Ritalin or some of these other derivatives.
But by the way, Matt, I got to ask you, did you ever actually take one of the pills yourself to see what it does to you?
No.
God damn it, I did.
No, I didn't.
I sure as shit did.
Those red pills were crazy.
That stuff is no shit. I mean, it's speed. I was up for 20 hours.
It is, and the thing is, they don't really realize like what they're giving because it's so potent to even like me, and I'm 26, and we're older, and they're 10, 11 years old, and they don't really know what it's going to do to them.
Yeah,
and they're giving
it's their go-to though.
Speed.
It's just their go-to because that's what they're told by the
Yep. Yeah,
it's to go to the freezer, get the box.
Yeah, it is, and it's really scary to think about. What is it doing to these kids? And it's scary a lot. And as a parent, you're like, if I'm not seeing that much of improvement, why am I doing this to my kid?
Exactly.
Right. And so then you look for alternatives. And if this is an alternative that allows them to deal with some of these issues without medicating, I'm all in. Because
I like the technology aspect, non-pharmaceutical, to treat these various issues with kids or adults.
Not having the issues currently, is it less of a treatment as more of a ability for them to cope and manage with the deck they've been dealt?
So, I mean, that's the thought process behind it, but I don't know that it does. I'm not sure what to Joff's point, I didn't take a pill, so I don't know what the impact for me as an adult would have been, but I can't imagine what that does to an adolescent.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the scariest part. And parents will just be like, okay, I'm putting my kid on Ritalin. I'm like, do you know what that's going to do? I don't know that helps
my question is that I'm going to put my kid on Ritalin. Fuck, you're giving them speed and that, but I'm going to put my kid in VR. Is the speed a drug mechanism to be able for them to deal with the situation and be able to be more uncomfortable in certain environments and be able to focus more? Or is the virtual reality the same thing in which they're in situations where they can now build mechanisms in which they can cope so that when they're not in VR, they don't have to take VR to be in a social situation where it would help?
I mean, hopefully that is what this research is trying to
identify. It kind of comes full circle to the interview we did with Mandy, who's keynoting RVASec in Richmond, Virginia. Jake Koons, it's an awesome individual I've known forever. I got a chance to meet our families collectively met in Disney World, and I met his family and some of the boat rides between the various things.
Nice.
And him and his dad wrote a children's book that my kids, Jake, absolutely love, by the way. My oldest son is reading it to the younger ones, and it's all about how families and dads and kids deal with, and moms deal with technology. and he wrote it with his dad, which is really cool. But man, he was looking for someone. Unfortunately, he wanted me to keynote, but I couldn't because it overlaps with my son's birthday. But he was looking for someone different to keynote, and I said, "Look, the interview that I've done that really sticks out, dude, is with Mandy, who basically hacked her brain and her body back to health, and that's similar to what we're talking about right now. And she's keynoting RVASec, and I was just so happy to see that all pan out. I think it's a great topic for us to talk about as hackers, right?
Because I think in my son's specific case, his autism is more related to, I think, brain damage from his open heart surgery when he was 3 months old. Mm-hmm. And the brain needs to reconnect pathways.
Yes. That's what Mandy talks about. Have you listened to that?
No, I haven't, but I know her story because we've talked to her.
That's exactly what she talks about,
and it's about reconnecting pathways. Mm-hmm. Drugs, I don't think, are the things you want to figure out how to reconnect the brain pathways.
They treat symptoms. They don't reconnect pathways.
Right. What I think is important for children that have autism, children that are ADD or ADHD, it's about creating the synapses in the brain and allowing the brain to create those new pathways to manage the situations. And if VR or any of these technologies are a way to facilitate that
without just treating the symptom, right?
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. Is way healthier than just drugging your kids.
Because let's be honest, just pharmaceuticals really just treat symptoms.
Yes.
I mean, just make one more comment on Matt's dead on. Having watched my child for 20 plus years, the thing that a virtual reality environment gives them, and he's a big gamer for really the same reasons, is it gives them a sense of control over their environment and to take in that environment at a certain sequenced level, at a certain sequenced speed. One of the big issues with autistic kids is they cannot process the parallel signals from the external world at the same pace as the rest of us. Right. And so they get overwhelmed really quickly. Yeah. So to put them in an environment where it's a controlled environment allows them to do it on their terms, which makes an enormous difference to the way they're able to interact with that world.
It's sensory processing.
Is that why you see autistic children? Is it autistic children that wear headphones?
Yes.
To help kind of
to cut out the additional sensory because it's a sensory processing issue. And so when you, some kids are better with, and Kyle doesn't need this, but there are kids in his class, for example, that wear the headphones, and that is to cut out all the external sensory input that they can't process effectively. And so the headphones help them deal with that. If VR gives them that same sense of sensory processing because it's in a controlled environment, it would help them kind of, like I said, reconnect some of those synapses to be able to
relearn that. Potentially over time, adding more and more stimulus to build more synapses.
Yes. Right. So as Larry said, when they're not in the virtual reality world, they've retrained their brain, made those connections to have,
and hopefully they can cope better with all the external sensory inputs that they're dealing with.
Yes.
And going on top of that, in the article it states it's ironic that technology is being tested to remediate distraction, given that screens are one of the primary drivers of distraction in the world today. Yeah. But virtual reality has the benefit of offering immersive environments, those in which distractions can be precisely controlled and amplified or decreased during exposure therapies, which makes total sense.
Exactly what we're talking about.
Exactly.
So, this was a marathon episode. I want to thank everyone for being on the show. Another marathon episode. Thank you everyone for listening and watching. Larry, take us out.
Over and virtual reality.
Out.